Chapter 1067. The issue of enfeoffment was the first big problem in establishing the Fire Kingdom. However, with the Development Committee handling it, Liszt didn't have much to worry about. He only needed to confirm the titles of Duke, Marquis and Earl. Viscount, Baron and Lord were all conferred by the Development Committee based on military achievements. Now there was another problem in front of Liszt, which was to form a cabinet and an outer cabinet. The knight system in this world was a feudal serfdom system. Any noble lord was a feudal slave owner. Apart from paying taxes to the superior lord, all other powers were in the hands of the lord, such as justice, finance, military, trade, agriculture and so on. Of course, the justice of the territory was still subject to the kingdom's laws. Thus, if Liszt wanted to govern the Fire Kingdom, he had to consider the governance of Flame Island and other undivided lands, as well as effectively constrain the various levels of lords in the kingdom. This involved the system of cabinet officials on the Blazing Island and the system of external cabinet officials of the Blazing Kingdom. In other kingdoms, the king would usually convene the lords to discuss the kingdom's affairs. At the same time, the nobles would have to enter the palace to take up positions and manage the royal family for the king. However, when it came to Liszt, he planned to strengthen the centralization of power, so he divided the officials into the cabinet and the outer cabinet. The outer cabinet was easy to deal with. The Development Committee could just patch it up and form an outer cabinet. Thus, when it was close to the new year, he issued dozens of appointment documents in the name of the Fire Kingdom, announcing them to the entire kingdom. Duke Lee William Tulip was appointed as the Prime Minister of the Outer Cabinet. Marquise Emily Flame was appointed as the First Defense Minister, Earl Marcus Wheel was appointed as the Second Defense Minister, and Marquis Sassamit Saint was appointed as the Third Defense Minister. The First Defense Minister was the head of the department, while the Second and Third Defense Ministers were his assistants. Marquise D. Maria Rainstone was appointed as the First Foreign Affairs Minister, and Marquis Yevich Peanut was appointed as the Second Foreign Affairs Minister. Marquis Geoffrey Furonque was appointed as the First Internal Affairs Minister, and Marquis Duroot Red Apricot was appointed as the Second Internal Affairs Minister. Marquis Paris Flame was appointed as the First Finance Minister, and Gort Mast Earl was appointed as the Second Finance Minister. Duke Piero Grey Iron was appointed as the First Justice Minister. Crazy Truth was appointed as the First Minister of Arcane Magic, while Kenley Truth was appointed as the Second Minister of Arcane Magic. Marquis Bluebos was appointed as the First Minister of the Sea. He also appointed other marquises and earls as Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Trade, Minister of Education, Minister of Craftsmen, Minister of Health, Minister of Communications, etc. The appointment to the Outer Pavilion did not cause too much of a stir. In fact, many nobles were not willing to become ministers of the Outer Pavilion. Now that the country had been established and the nobles had all become feudal lords, they wanted to build their own territories. At most, they would listen to the king's orders during times of war. However, the Outer Pavilion was an order from Liszt, and the nobles who served as ministers had to take time out to exercise their duties and power. Compared to the Outer Pavilion's announcement to the entire nation, the establishment of the cabinet was very low-key. The reason was very simple. Liszt did not want the feudal lords to participate in his management of the Blazing Island. He directly selected full-time administrators from the various academies, as well as a suitable knight from the Burning Legion to form a cabinet under his control. At the same time that the Outer Pavilion and the cabinet were established, he also established the internal court of the Palace of Sun, Moon and Stars. To put it bluntly, they were full-time servants of the family. The old butler Carter served as the internal court's chief steward. Mrs. Morrison, who was excellent at brewing milk tea, served as the chief steward of the maids. Mrs. Abbey, who was getting fatter and fatter, served as the chief steward of the catering department. Thomas, who was originally a valet and later became the Thorncastle's butler, served as the chief steward of the male servants. In addition, there were also the wine master, drama master, horse groom's master, etiquette master and so on. Only a few of these officials were Liszt's old acquaintances in the Flower Town. The rest were mostly servants plundered from the Eagle Kingdom in recent years. The castles of aristocratic lords had a large number of servants. Skilled servants were more expensive than craftsmen in the serf market. At present, the Palace of Sun, Moon and Stars had more than 1,800 servants responsible for maintaining the operation of this huge palace. At present, only Liszt lived in the palace. Achi, Amelie, Paris, and the others did not often live in the castle. Madame Penelope also lived with Lee William. But even if he was alone, Liszt was not willing to let himself be wronged. He wanted the palaces of the other kingdoms to be as gorgeous as they were. This was not only for enjoyment, but also to reflect the glory of the Flame family. How could a king destined to go down in history not have a magnificent palace and a group of servants as a foil? Is this the palace of sun, moon, and stars? It is truly magnificent and unimaginably magnificent. Among the emissary group of a certain principality that came to participate in the founding celebration of the Flame Kingdom, the head of the emissary group stood in the corridor of the diplomatic hall of the Flame Kingdom, looking at the palace of sun, moon, and stars in the distance and sighing in admiration. The emissary's deputy immediately followed up, "Sir, this is a palace that was built with the participation of arch-wizards. You see, these two mountains were forcibly joined together by powerful magic power to become what they are today." Another deputy also followed up, "It is said that there are still many wonders that have yet to be built. The Flame Kingdom now has two arch-wizards. Any great building is very simple for them." Yes, the times are changing too quickly. A few years ago, who would have heard of a person like Liszt? However, the current Liszt is a great legend that no one dares to ignore in the northeast of the legendary continent. The head of the emissary group clicked his tongue. After all, the Flame Kingdom is the publicly acknowledged son of glory. "Hey, if I can ride a dragon, I am willing to reduce my lifespan by 10 years. You are willing to reduce your lifespan by 10 years? I am willing to reduce my lifespan by 20 years. Hee, then wouldn't you die while riding a dragon? What do you mean by that? Do I look very old? I'm only 30 years old this year." The two deputies immediately started arguing about the topic of reducing lifespan by riding a dragon. The head of the emissary group waited until they were about to turn red before saying, "All right, stop arguing. Don't let the Flame people see you as a joke. The glory of the night can't take care of you. If you haven't even touched a dragon before, then don't even think about riding a dragon. You should place your sights on World of Warcraft. Look at this Flame Kingdom, how many night-riding birds." Following the direction of his finger, many night-riding large birds could be seen flying in the sky above the Flame Kingdom. Some of them were the guards patrolling the kingdom, the Orders of Chivalry Linnet team. Some of them were the noble lords who had arrived at the kingdom to prepare for the conferring ceremony. With the beast taming contract, there were more and more night-riding flying birds in the Flame Kingdom. However, not all night could get the beast taming contract. They had to contribute to the kingdom and sign a confidentiality agreement before they could get the beast taming contract. Of course, no matter how strict the confidentiality measures were, it was impossible to keep it a secret. The biggest advantage of the Flame Kingdom was Liszt's Awe of the Phoenix ability. He could drive away the birds in World of Warcraft and quickly form a beast taming contract with a knight. Otherwise, the wild World of Warcraft would rarely accept taming from humans, let alone recognize a knight and form a beast taming contract. Just as the three emissaries were pointing at the Flame Kingdom, suddenly, a huge figure leaped out from the horizon. The silhouette got closer and closer. Under the terrified gazes of the three, the gigantic silhouette slowly approached the Inferno Kingdom. It was a majestic, gigantic lion. Thick fur, sharp eyes, full of vigor, scanning the entire Fire King city. That's the giant lion Nimia? Previously, the Fire Kingdom's receptionist reminded us that the Fire Kingdom has a giant lion Nimia as a guardian beast. Heavens, is giant lion Nimia that big? Unicorn, giant lion Nimia, and Phoenix, fire dragon bird. Alright, there's also that giant lightning dragon turtle. Not only is His Majesty the King of the Fire Kingdom adept at riding dragons, he's also extremely attractive to sky dragons. The leader of the emissaries was filled with admiration. He paused for a moment. He then added, "Glory to the knight, it is my honor to be able to live in the same era as such a great knight, and to have an audience with His Majesty Liszt." Chapter 1068. Although the Fire Kingdom is located in the sea outside of the legendary continent, I can't help but feel worried after witnessing the development here. The emissary group of the Eagle Kingdom was still Alexander White Iron. At this moment he had already checked into the Hall of the Fire Kingdom. After following the receptionist and visiting the Fire Kingdom and the Sun, Moon and Stars Palace, he couldn't help but look worried. "Yes sir, the Fire Kingdom is too." The deputy wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the right words to describe what he had seen. The pressure was immense, but he understood what the deputy wanted to express. "The Taiwa Kingdom." "Yes sir, this is the feeling. It's like walking in the legendary Moon Empire. Tall stone buildings, wide and clean streets, neatly organized shops and houses, constantly patrolling teams and strange Mercedes-Benz cars. This is probably what the real Moon Empire looks like." After the deputy praised, he said sourly, it's really different to have a magic shooter. The light of civilization brought by magic has allowed the Fire Kingdom to enjoy such beauty. Alexander sighed. Moon Mountain, Sun Mountain. King List's ambition is probably greater than we thought. It's hard to look up to him. What does these two mountains have to do with King List's ambition? Moon Mountain is the Moon Empire, Sun Mountain is the Sun Empire, and his palace is the Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace. Doesn't this mean that he inherited all the glory of the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire? Sun Empire? The deputy was confused. It's also an ancient magic civilization. It's as great as the Moon Empire, but it's not in the legendary continent. It's on the other side of the Devil's Sea. After the collapse of the magic civilization, it was no longer able to reach the other side of the Devil's Sea. Alexander was a noble born in the royal family, so he knew a lot. In fact, the legend of the Sun Empire wasn't a secret. It was just that information was limited. Most commoners and nobles had never heard of it. So, when List first learned about the Sun's Child, he thought that he had discovered an incredible new continent. History wasn't recorded, but this was a magical fantasy world. The dragon-raising family had a long history, so they naturally knew many secrets passed down from ancient times. Then, sir, did King List really inherit the Sun Empire? Who knows? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Alexander didn't say much. He knew that the so-called inheritance was nonsense. There was no relationship between the ancient magic civilization and the night civilization at all. This was just the dragon-rearing family trying to make themselves look good. However, deceiving commoners and lesser nobles was not a bad idea. This would make commoners revere nobles, and lesser nobles revere the greater nobles. From his point of view, List was also trying to flatter himself, shamelessly flattering both the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire. However, he felt that it was only natural for List to say such things. The reason was simple. The Fire Kingdom had two magic shooters. Whoever had a magic shooter could rightfully claim that they had inherited the ancient magic civilization. It was now the era of the shrinking magic net, and it was very difficult for high mages to advance. Without the favor of magic, without the care of the truth, it was impossible for a high mage to be born. So Alexander quickly changed the topic. Many mages from the three kingdoms are moving to the Fire Kingdom. This has become the holy land of magic. And he is the son of glory, the person most favored by the glory of the night. Dragons and sub-dragons revolve around him. This is not a good thing for our Eagle Kingdom. Yes, King List is secretly supporting the expansion order of the Sapphire Fly. Unfortunately, the two victories in the dragon-slaying war made it difficult for our kingdom to resist. The deputy shook his head. Speaking of the expansion order, Alexander fell into silence. This was the shame of the Eagle Kingdom that lasted for hundreds of years. He thought that after Adonis inherited the throne, he would put Alonso Celeste in an important position, which would solve the hidden danger of the Sapphire Fly once and for all. He didn't expect that it would reflect the rise of List. After a while, he adjusted his emotions and let out a sigh. Dragon Duo really does whatever he wants. List, who was giving Alexander a lot of pressure, was in the palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars, entertaining the Steel Ridge Kingdom's envoy group that had just arrived. The head of the envoy group, Mashu Rose White Rose, was his distinguished guest, and he personally accompanied Mashu to the banquet. Mashu, thank you for personally serving as the head of the envoy group and celebrating the founding ceremony of the Fire Kingdom for me. At the same time, thank you for the gift from the Rose White Rose family. This batch of red dragon water has helped me greatly. List sincerely thanked Mashu. He spent too much resources raising the dragon. The most scarce thing was the red dragon water. Your Majesty List, you are the most distinguished friend of the Rose White Rose family. If it weren't for my father's old age, he would have come to congratulate your Majesty in person. I have understood the intention of the Grand Duke of Rose, Mashu. Let's get drunk tonight. Of course. After the toast, the atmosphere of the banquet became more and more lively. At this time, Mashu mentioned the marriage. She hinted that her sister was already an adult, and she was always looking forward to meeting List. However, List had no intention of marrying Marilyn Red White Rose as his queen, so he laughed it off, indicating that he had been too busy recently and couldn't be distracted. This was already hinting that he would not marry Marilyn without hurting his reputation. He still had a good impression of the generous Rose White Rose family who liked to throw money at people. It was a pity that Mashu did not seem to understand or believe the excuse that List found. In the early days of the founding of the country he was really busy. He thought that after this busy period, maybe List should think about marriage. So the banquet continued to laugh, and the drunk Mashu was helped to rest by the servants. Liszt, who had used his combat power to digest the wine, took a bath. In the steamy bathroom, the crystal lamp exuded a soft light. He couldn't help but rub his head. "Mashu, honest man?" I gave such an obvious hint and she didn't respond. It seems that after the founding ceremony, I have to write a letter to make clear my attitude. I can't delay Marilyn's life for a little red dragon water. Although he was already a qualified noble and considered everything from the perspective of benefits, deep in his heart, he still had a simple kindness. No matter what the politics or interests were, they shouldn't have affected an ignorant girl. He made a decision in his heart. He couldn't help but smile. "I'm really a good person. Please remember this book's domain name." Jiuqian Xinhuang Mobile Version Website. Chapter 1069. Your Majesty, this is the Frac Abier designed with reference to the Eagle King, the Steel Ridge King, and the Blast Furnace King. Is there anything else you need to modify? The best tailor in the Fire Kingdom was the inner court gown officer Morris. He led his assistant to hold a set of luxurious clothing and stood in front of Liszt, asking respectfully, "The laff-pleated collar is too big. Remove it for me. Don't embroider such an obvious flame emblem on the chest. Just blend the flame into the fabric in the form of a pattern. And the images of these dragons be abstract. Don't make it too high profile. I don't like it. The dragon pattern is easy to deal with. But Your Majesty, the huge laff-pleated collar is the king's authority. Don't question. Learn to listen. Mosley, go and modify it." Liszt waved his hand lightly. He didn't need the pleated collar to show his authority. He had a huge dissatisfaction with the clothing here since a long time ago, especially the pleated collar. It could suffocate people to death in the summer. Now that he had become the king, it was time to reform the strange aristocratic clothing and replace the bloated frac abier with simple, fitting clothes. But there was no need to reform too much at once. It would be too unconventional and nondescript. He planned to use a year to slowly change the aristocratic clothing of the Fire Kingdom to suits, tuxedos, and equestrian attire on Earth. Suits could be worn in daily life, tuxedos could be worn on formal occasions, and equestrian attire was for riding. Of course, the colors of suits, tuxedos, and equestrian attire on Earth were relatively monotonous. This was not what Liszt liked. Although he advocated simple clothes, he had a pursuit for color. He would stipulate that the king's clothing could use gold and red. Other aristocrats could use colors other than gold and red. Only a variety of colors was stylish enough. Just as he sent gown officer Morris away, a servant came to report that Gort wanted to see him. Let him in. A moment later, Gort walked into the Palace of Stars. After seeing Liszt, he gave a slightly exaggerated salute. "Your Majesty, your most loyal follower, Gort Mast, offers you the most sincere greetings." "All right, Gort, you don't have to say a bunch of hypocritical bootlicking every time." Gort chuckled. "Your Majesty, this is not hypocritical flattery. This is my sincere respect for you. It's just that I've been too excited recently. The Flame Kingdom is about to be established. This is a great kingdom. When I followed you in the Flower Town, I had only experienced such an incredible scene in my dreams. This means that you didn't think highly of me back then." Liszt sipped his milk tea and glanced at Gort. Gort immediately complained, "How could that be? It's just that Your Majesty's glory is so strong that it has blinded my eyes. I, on the other hand, was a down-and-out countryside aristocrat. My horizons could not transcend the Coral Island. It was Your Majesty who brought me from the Flower Town to the vast world." Stop with the flattery. What business do you have here?" Liszt went straight to the point. Occasionally listening to flattery was good for the body and mind, but listening to it too much was boring. Gort had been following Liszt for nearly 7 years since the Flower Town. He was very familiar with Liszt's style and therefore restrained his desire to continue flattering. Immediately after, he said sternly, "We have drawn up a procedure for the night procession from the Flame Kingdom's Gilded Avenue, through the Arc de Triomphe, all the way to the Plaza of the Palaces of the Sun, Moon and Stars, to be inspected by Your Majesty. Marquis de Maria believes that he can accept Your Majesty's conferment in the plaza, while Duke Piero believes that he should accept the conferment in the main hall. According to the procedure of the founding ceremony, the conferment ceremony would be followed by the night procession. Now there was a disagreement. De Maria felt that the conferment in the plaza would be the center of attention. Piero felt that the conferment in the main hall was in line with the noble etiquette of aristocrats. What about my father's opinion? Sir Marquis has no opinion. Therefore the outer pavilion cannot make a decision for the time being and can only report to you." Gort replied. Since the conferment ceremony had not yet been completed, The titles of aristocrats were still the same as before. Liszt pondered for a moment and then said, "After the night procession, the lords, baron and viscounts will accept the conferment in the plaza, while the counts and marquises will accept the conferment in the main hall. The dukes will hold a separate conferment ceremony at a later date." The different conferment ceremonies for the upper, middle and lower aristocrats were quite in line with their respective classes. Gort responded, "Then I will go back and prepare." "Sir Laird, are you sure you don't want to be the first arcane minister? Chrissy has already declined to me several times. She believes that you are closer to the truth and have served as the chief magic consultant of the noble Frost Empire for many years. The position of first arcane minister is more suitable for you." In the morning he was still preparing for the founding ceremony in the palaces of the Sun, Moon and Stars. In the afternoon, Liszt had already arrived at the Reed City's Wizard Tower and met High Wizard Laird Truth. He tried to persuade Laird to become the first arcane minister. Laird straightforwardly refused. "No, Your Majesty Liszt, this kind of official position is not what I am after. I stayed in the Fire Kingdom to pursue the truth, not to be caught up in mundane affairs. Also, when it comes to being closer to the truth, Achilles is the one who is closest to it. I'm already very satisfied that I can cooperate and do some research." Achi could not become the first arcane minister. She was not human and did not have much of a sense of identity with most humans. She only acknowledged Liszt. What she liked was to do research and explore the truth. Seeing Laird's firm attitude, Liszt no longer tried to persuade him. In his heart, he also did not want Laird to become the first arcane minister. He trusted Chrissy more, and Chrissy had been constantly cooperating with him to complete the reform of the Magi system, allowing the Arcanist system to replace the Magi system. When he walked into the laboratory he saw Achi operating a magic microscope. Liszt stood to the side, motioning for the grown-up Lucy and Ruth not to come over to greet him, and to focus on helping Achi with the experiment. After waiting for a while, Achi left the eyepiece of the magic microscope. When she saw Liszt she immediately revealed a sweet smile. "Brother, you're here." "Yes, what experiment are you doing?" "Observation of the sun's child bloodline. Using the magic microscope we can get detailed information about the druid transformation." Achi turned around and said to the twins, "Lucy, bring over the experiment records for this period of time. Ruth, clean the magic microscope and prepare a new observation sample." "Yes, teacher." Although the twins were not adults yet, their bodies had already grown up, and they already had a faint feminine taste. Their appearance was getting better and better. Of course, compared to Achi there was still a huge gap. But this did not prevent Liszt from looking at the twins with an appreciative gaze. The charm of a young girl who had just matured was unique. It was a pleasure to endure. Lucy was now proficient in fire magic, and Ruth was proficient in water magic. They had already begun to show that they were highly valued by the smoke mission. According to Achi's observation, both of them could become archmages before they reached adulthood. If some means were taken to promote their growth, it was not impossible to look forward to becoming archmages. "Teacher, the experiment records you wanted." Lucy quickly brought over a few notes. Achi took the notes and handed one to Liszt. "Brother, take a look at this first. This is Achi's summary of the information on the stronghold. After reading it, brother should have a comprehensive understanding of how to reach the stronghold. Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heavens God Emperor." Chapter 1070. The laboratory was very quiet. After handing the notes to Liszt, Achi told Liszt a few points to pay attention to, and then she continued to do experiments with Lucy and Ruth. Time passed. For Liszt, this summary note written by Achi herself was the most obscure book he had read in recent years. However, he read it more seriously than ever. Not only did he read it word by word, but he also flipped back from time to time. There was not much content in the notes, only about 30,000 words long, but he read it for 3 hours. It was not until the sky outside the window darkened that he suddenly closed the notebook and gently exhaled. He closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. He quietly pondered the contents of the notes. The contents were Achi's summary of all the research related to barriers in the past 2 years. She analyzed the basis for the existence of barriers from the 3 levels of magic power, matter and spirit. She also described the existence of barriers in an abstract way and proposed the possibility of touching the barrier. Starting with magic power is the most likely way for me to touch the barrier at the moment. I swallowed the Phoenix incarnation and have supreme magical fire attribute chi. Leo also has supreme magical fire attribute magic power. Leo and I are training as Dragon Knight, which is the easiest way to break the magic barrier. Barrier was a very abstract concept. However, it was not difficult to understand. List's summary of Achi's notes could be likened to a deeper understanding of breaking the inherent concept. For example, the ancients might think that matter was composed of tiny particles. Then modern scientists relied on microscopy and other means to get the concept of molecules, believing that molecules were the smallest matter. Then scientists discovered the concept of atoms, believing that atoms were the smallest matter. Molecules and atoms were barriers for the scientists of that era. However, modern scientists discovered the concept of quarks, believing that quarks were the smallest matter. So scientists broke the atomic barrier and quarks became the new barrier. List thought for a moment in his mind, then sighed slightly. So the magic barrier is the essence of the formation of magic power. Achi asked me to start from this aspect to trace the formation of magic power. But what do I have to do to trace the formation of magic power? What kind of training method does Dragon Knight use to trace the formation of magic power? After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure it out. He stood up and said, Achi, I'm going out for a walk. I still need time to digest some of the content. And you don't have to rush, big brother. There's still a lot of time. In turn, Achi comforted List not to worry. In the past, it was List who told her not to be a workaholic. After leaving the Infernal Mage Tower, List rode on the formless dragon Bard, tore through space and arrived at the endless volcanoes. He then summoned Leo from one of the volcanoes. A man and a dragon leisurely soared in the sky. List shared the information he had obtained about the stronghold with Leo. A dragon's IQ was not lower than a human's, and Leo also hoped to improve himself and become a stronger dragon. Therefore, he was very cooperative with List when it came to cultivating in the stronghold. List, most of my dragon supreme magic comes from volcanoes, and the magic power of volcanoes comes from endless flames and magma. Could the stronghold be in the volcanoes? The stronghold is not a fixed object. It is a state, a cognition, a nature. But what you said reminded me, where did the volcano supreme magic come from? Perhaps it can be seen as the existence of the stronghold. No, in the triangle theory, matter and spirit can become magic power at any time. The volcano supreme magic might be transformed from magma and other substances, so it doesn't involve the stronghold. Perhaps your thoughts are shackled. I am the flame and the flame is me. You said that fire dragons are born from volcanoes and will turn into volcanoes after death. Then volcanoes give birth to me and raise me. Why can't the stronghold of fire magic power be in the volcanoes? Leo asked. The stronghold has nothing to do with your birth. There have been so many dragons in history, but it seems that only the Weave Dragon broke the stronghold. I want to be the first fire dragon to break the stronghold. I hope so too. Then let's go to the volcanoes. Their minds were connected as one, and the questions they were thinking about were actually the same as the questions they were thinking about. Thus, the few thoughts that flashed through their minds were directly expressed as a man and a dragon flying out of the clouds, rushing towards the mouth of a volcano that was emitting smoke. List, if we bathe in the volcano for 10 days to half a month, we might be able to touch the stronghold of fire magic power. Stop fooling around. The Fire Kingdom's founding ceremony is coming up soon. I need to rush back as soon as possible. What's so important about a human kingdom? Without a kingdom, where would we get fire dragon potions for you to drink? Just leave it to those ants to work for us. You are the king and I am the dragon. We just need to enjoy everything. Whoever dares to refuse to provide for us will be destroyed. Although Leo was suppressed by List's soul imprint, he still could not hide the fact that he was an evil dragon. I'll accompany you down there for a spin, and then I need to go back immediately. This is not negotiable. But you can bathe in the lava and slowly search for the stronghold of fire magic power. Of course I will. The man and the dragon in the form of magic power merged into the lava of the volcano. Volcano supreme demons were being produced here at all times, but the rate of production was very slow and could not keep up with Leo's absorption speed. But this time, Leo did not absorb the small amount of volcano supreme demons. Instead, he carefully observed the birth of the volcano supreme demons. List was also carefully observing. Ever since he swallowed the phoenix and obtained the phoenix incarnation, he could freely swim in the lava and flames. He had not really carefully experienced the lava. Every time he entered and left the lava, he was in a hurry. He did not like the lava environment very much. This was not like soaking in a hot spring. The feeling of entering the lava and losing all 5 senses and relying solely on magic power was no different from claustrophobia for humans. But when he calmed down and observed, he gradually found that the lava was very interesting. I didn't feel any decrease in the magma, but the volcano super demon appeared just like that. Is it because the amount of magma changed too little when the magma changed into magic power, or is the volcano super demon not made from magma? He focused his attention and thought about the difference. Relying on the existence of magic eyes, he had a clear understanding of the transformation between matter and magic power. Especially when he used the dragon eye orbit while riding on Leo, he could clearly see that even a piece of mud could be decomposed into earth magic power under special circumstances. And how earth magic power formed stones and mud was also vivid in his mind. Fire, fire magic power; seawater, water magic power; breeze, wind magic power; ice, ice magic power; lightning, thunder magic power. All of them were constantly transforming. Only light magic power and dark magic power rarely transformed into matter. It was more like a special inactive magic power state. Lava flames? Volcano supreme demons? Vaguely, Liszt felt that he had grasped an important inspiration. Chapter 1071. Creating something out of nothing. This sentence appeared in Liszt's mind. This was one of the 36 stratagems. If you insisted that you had something that didn't exist, it would be the same as making something up. It was also an inspiration that he suddenly thought of. The so-called magic barrier might be creating something out of nothing. And this creating something out of nothing wasn't creating without any basis, but creating from nothing. In the triangle theory, magic power could be transformed from matter and spirit, which all belong to the category of creating something out of something. Therefore, ordinary fire and fire-type magic power belong to this category, which only high school students could have. Therefore, there was no information about barriers. However, the relationship between volcano and magma was creating something out of nothing, which made him think that volcano was a product of creating barriers. The source of volcano is nothing, but the formation of this nothing requires harsh conditions. In my opinion, the high-temperature environment and the dense fire-type magic power of the magma are good breeding grounds for the formation of nothing. And this nothing is more like the essence of the world. It was difficult to explain Liszt's current inspiration with words. For example, there should be applause here. The environment represented by this nothing was as it should be. Where there should be super magic, there should be super magic. The magic barrier was such an abstract concept. So, in order to touch the barrier of fire magic power, I have to understand this nothing, and do what should be. Now it seems that this is more like an idealistic view of the world. He sent a message to Leo saying, "Follow me." Then he suddenly rushed out of the lava. He turned into a blazing phoenix and hovered above the crater of the volcano. Soon, Leo also rushed out of the magma and turned into a black and red evil fire dragon. Liszt, who had returned to his human body, landed on the Dragon Tooth platform and quickly completed the Dragon Knight resonance and mind connection. "Leo, I might have found the barrier." He shared his inspiration with Leo, and the two thoughts kept exploring and fusing. Soon Leo let out a deafening roar. Roar? He was expressing his and Liszt's excitement. Touch the barrier and find as it should be. The man and the dragon felt that the path ahead of them had suddenly become clear. The thick fog that covered the path of the Dragon Knight's cultivation system quickly disappeared. The Supreme Demonic Dragon and the Supreme Demonic Dragon battle chi intertwined and circulated continuously. This was a human and a dragon trying to apply the idealistic worldview of how things should be to the materialistic reality. Liszt took the lead and Leo assisted from the side. Liszt could understand the idealism and materialism better. He had received materialistic education on Earth and had formed a deeply rooted materialistic worldview. After transmigrating to this world, there was no religion or God shrouding it. Even though there were magical colors formed by magic, the main world was still dominated by materialism. But this did not mean that idealism was wrong. In fact, no one on Earth could prove that idealism was absolutely wrong. Idealism and materialism were just two different philosophies to understand the world. Liszt did not know much about philosophy. At this moment he was using these two terms to express his inspiration for exploring the barrier. The barrier is a door, Leo. It exists in this world, strictly adhering to the triangular theory of magic, matter, and spirit. It maintains the operation of the world. But what we need to do is to open this door. How do we open it? Open it from the heart. This door also exists in our hearts. We are all a part of the world. If we want to be as powerful as the Weave Dragon, we must open this door and break the triangular theory. We must jump out of the operating system of the world and touch it. Leo landed on the peak of the volcano with Liszt sitting on his back. The afterglow of the setting sun plated the man and dragon with a layer of golden light, making them look like motionless statues. But their hearts were burning, and their magic and fighting chi were also boiling. The materialistic worldview had been deeply imprinted in their minds. Trying to integrate it with the idealistic worldview was no different from completing a self-denial. But this was the only way to improve oneself. Difficult. So difficult. Even if I already understand the true meaning of the barrier, I'm still ignorant as to how to break it. When the sun completely sank into the horizon, he slowly shook his head, but there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. But I've already successfully touched the barrier. Smoke serpentines that he had not seen for a long time floated in front of him. Mission completed. Reward: fate's favor. The 203rd smoke mission, which was also the smoke mission that had taken the longest time, was finally completed. He had obtained the reward of fate's favor that he had been looking forward to. At this moment, List already understood the reward of fate's favor, because the smoke serpentines in front of him didn't continue to change into new serpentines. Instead, they slowly dissipated. At the same time, a cloud of smoke formed an oval seed in his mind. It didn't look like a seed at all, but List knew that it was a seed. Could also be called a smoke dragon. It represented a brand new divine dragon, the smoke dragon. It was being nurtured in his mind, just like the fire dragon Leo and the water dragon Water that had been nurtured in his body. But the smoke dragon was being nurtured in his mind, slowly absorbing the power of fate. There will be no more smoke missions in the future. However, the power of fate is slowly recovering. I don't know how long it will take for the smoke dragon to be nurtured, but it's clear that I'm the biggest beneficiary. Because I am blessed by fate. The power of fate revolves around me. Everything will go smoothly and good fortune will continue. At this moment I am the smoke dragon. He could feel the smoke dragon in his mind. Perhaps because he had been immersed in it for too long, it had already been branded with his own mark. In other words, even if the smoke dragon was nurtured, he wouldn't need to ride it anymore. He even felt that the smoke dragon might not be able to nurture an independent dragon personality. Because unlike the fire dragon Leo and the water dragon Water, all the nutrients of the smoke dragon came from List. There was almost no residual power of the previous generation of smoke dragons. Even the power of fate was gathered through List. He completed missions again and again, strengthening fate again and again. When he said that he was the smoke dragon, he wasn't bragging. It was the truth. Moreover, I can also feel that the birth of this smoke dragon gives me a feeling of suddenly seeing the light of fate. It seems that I can avoid disasters and even stir the threads of fate around me. This is the first time that I have truly grasped this power. He mounted Leo and galloped towards the distant Phoenix City. When he passed by the Phoenix Parasol Tree Forest, he immediately had a flash of inspiration and a wonderful trance came over him. There were 2 Phoenix Parasol trees in the forest. It seemed that as long as he willed it, he could stir the threads of fate and let the 2 trees give birth to sprites. And so he did. It just so happened that the Phoenix Parasol Tree Dragon sprite, Ainfant, came over riding the fire dragon bird Little Red. List said to Ainfant, "Ainfant, pay attention to these 2 trees at all times and see if they will give birth to sprite worms. Once they do, call me immediately." Ainfant, who was wearing a small knight leather armor, patted his chest. "Don't worry, leave it to me." Chapter 1072. Phoenix City was an undeveloped city. The main streets of the city had been planned, but the ground had not been broken. Currently there was only one small city in the endless volcanoes, Parasol City. Parasol City was originally a small town at the edge of the Phoenix Parasol Forest. With the development of the Fire Dragon Potion, this small town welcomed the opportunity to develop. Even the Guild of Magic had set up a branch here. The branch was mainly in charge of gathering potions and refining the Fire Dragon Potion. The Fire Dragon Potion only had one purpose: to supply potions to Leo. The dragon elf Ainfant's cordyceps had a huge area of influence. Phoenix parasol trees had been planted on an area of nearly 60,000 acres. The endless production of fire dragon potions was still unable to satisfy Leo's urgent needs. The volcano super magic produced by the few active volcanoes had also gradually decreased. Thus, Leo's growth had stagnated in the past 2 years. His body length and wingspan were maintained at 65 meters. There was still a long way to go before reaching the mark of adulthood, which was 100 meters in wingspan and body length. I've already become the controller of fate. The next step is to find more potions similar to the Fire Dragon Potion to help Leo grow. After touring the barren Phoenix City, List thought about how to break the barrier. Now that he had touched the barrier, he understood what it was. It wasn't just the barrier of fire magic. The barrier of other magic attributes, as well as the barrier of matter and spirit, had begun to show signs of forming. But for now, the most promising way to break the barrier was still to cooperate with Leo. It was impossible for a single person to accomplish such an idealistic operation that came out of nothing. When it came to the root of the barrier, this nothingness itself was an extremely harsh condition. Only dragon knights barely met the requirements to create nothingness, to touch and break through the barrier. Perhaps high mages could also touch the barrier, but breaking through it was far too difficult. After all, the magic system behind magic shooters relied on the magic of the weave dragon and not their own power. Leo is not an adult, and his power cannot be used to its limit. It's difficult for me to create an environment of nothing, and even more difficult to break this barrier. After coming into contact with the barrier, Liszt gradually had a complete train of thought. Therefore, the most important thing for me to train in the future is to help Leo reach adulthood as soon as possible. The other dragons want to break through the barrier, but they are still at a loss. Even the invisible dragon bard was not his first choice. It was still very difficult to accurately describe the barrier of matter with idealism. He wasn't someone who would bite off more than he could chew. Since he had decided to conquer the fire elemental mana barrier, he would put in all his effort and work with Leo to break the barrier first. Once he had the experience of breaking through the barrier, he would then set off to a new realm with Bard and the other dragons. But no matter what, right now I'm no longer just a dragon knight. Although I'm not a barrier knight yet, perhaps I can call my current state a half-step barrier knight? Although the term half-step stronghold knight sounded a bit melodramatic, it was also an appropriate description of Liszt's current state. The strength of a perfect phase dragon knight was severely restricted. It belonged to the pinnacle of power. Liszt, on the other hand, touched the rampart and understood the principle of creating something out of nothing. His and Leo's power quietly changed. It was a kind of boiling magic power. The speed at which the Supreme Dragon Magic and Supreme Demonic Dragon Dochi revolved was very fast, and the power that they could unleash was also very great. This was just a change. It was not a qualitative change, but the increase in strength was very obvious. Now, even if I fight a normal dragon alone, there shouldn't be any problem, right? If Leo and I become one with the dragon, I'm afraid no dragon knight will be able to block my attack. The increase in strength gave him endless confidence. In a trance, he could already see himself killing all the enemies and unifying the northeast corner of the legendary continent. He thought. The corner of his mouth could not help but curl up. I'm afraid that the Fire Kingdom will soon become the Fire Empire. Suddenly he raised his eyebrows. Leo let out a deafening roar and turned into a trail of flames, disappearing in the sky above Phoenix City. Let's go, Leo. Let's go back and prepare to be crowned king. Brother, you've changed. At first sight of Liszt in the palace of sun, moon and stars, Achi cried out in surprise. Oh, is that so? Achi, tell me where I've changed. Liszt was also very surprised by Achi's sensitivity. He had just touched the barrier and he was already noticed. Brother, your temperament has changed. Achi can't describe it, but compared to before, there's a very strange feeling. So, do you think this feeling is good or bad? Of course it's a good change. Oh, that's very good. Liszt smiled proudly. He then held Achi's hand and shared his joy with her. After reading your summary notes, I received a lot of inspiration. So, I went to the volcano and comprehended the true meaning of rampart. He immediately told Achi his understanding of the barrier without reservation. This made Achi want to immediately go back to the laboratory to verify the information. Don't worry, Achi. It's my kingdom's founding ceremony in a few days. You can put aside the trivial matters and share this supreme moment with me. Achi did not like to attend crowded occasions. However, when faced with Liszt's warm invitation, she could not refuse. Okay. Don't always think about work and research. Come, Achi, have a smile. From birth to death, there will always be endless work and research. When it's time to relax, we should relax decisively. Otherwise, when we get old, we will regret the lack of scenery along the way. He took Achi's hand and went to the highest palace room of the Palace of Sun, Moon, and Stars. Then they went up the stairs to a small balcony at the top of the palace room. Standing there, they could overlook the entire Flame Royal City. Do you remember when you first came to the Flower Town and lived in a small castle? Every day you could only look out the window and admire the small farm? Achi remembers. At that time, I was just a countryside baron, and you were just a small siren being chased by sea monsters. However, 6 or 7 years passed in a flash. You became the embodiment of truth walking in the secular world, the arch-wizard, and I became the dragon knight of several dragons. Now, the flame kingdom that we founded together is about to be established. Achi, do you feel a sense of accomplishment? Achi laughed. Brother, do you feel a sense of accomplishment? A full sense of accomplishment. List clasped his hands behind his back and gazed into the distance, his lofty sentiments shining brightly. This vast and fertile land is my country, this bustling crowd is my people, all the prosperity and desolation in front of me is my kingdom. List turned around. He looked down at Achi's beautiful face and then, under Achi's expectant and apprehensive gaze, he kissed the small siren's soft lips. Kingdom and beauty. Only children would do multiple choice questions. List wanted both. Chapter 1073. The landscape was picturesque and there were many heroes. Sapphire calendar year 158, January 1st. The festive atmosphere was not strong on Flame Island, because all the attention and atmosphere had been replaced by the Flame Kingdom's founding ceremony. When the first ray of sunlight rose in the morning along with the biting cold wind, the Flame Kingdom's royal city was already bustling with activity. All the residents had woken up early and gathered on both sides of the Gilt Avenue. The Gilt Avenue, which had a fence and was covered with a gold-red carpet, led from one end of the city to the other. Toot toot toot, the sound of horns mixed with the sound of musical instruments. It was the palace's band. The nobles here liked the elegant piano played indoors, but that did not mean that other musical instruments were not developed. The palace's band was a mixture of many folk musicians, standing on the float in a square formation and playing. It was a very cheerful song. Soon, a male chorus sounded in the accompaniment of the song. How glorious the bright sunshine is, the sky is clear after the storm, the fresh air makes one's heart flutter. How glorious the bright sunshine is, ah, your eyes are shining, as glorious as the sun, as glorious as the sun, her eyes will always be the most beautiful in my heart. This was a folk song widely spread in the northeast of the legendary continent. My son. The serpentine of the steel ridge, the wind of the eagle, and the rock text of the blast furnace castle all had translations of this folk song. And now, the male chorus was the serpentine version of My Son, which was the official language of the Flame Kingdom. As glorious as the sun. The ordinary residents on both sides of the Gilt Avenue quickly began to sing along with the chorus. Almost everyone could sing such a folk song. When the song ended, the performing group and chorus's float had already driven onto the Gilt Avenue. At this moment, a series of roofless carriages followed behind the float. Nobles dressed in luxurious frac habillés sat on the carriages. Ah, that's Viscount Blair. I know him. He's the administrator of our Flame Kingdom. Behind him is Viscount Isaiah, the administrator of Reed City. When I went to Reed City to do business, I saw Viscount Isaiah inspecting goods. They're all viscounts. Why don't I see any counts or marquises? I heard that the marquises and counts didn't participate in the parade. Today is the enfeoffment ceremony. The nobles will be enfeoffed in the palace. When will I be able to sit in a carriage and receive cheers? Don't even think about it. 366 carriages carrying 366 viscounts passed by ostentatiously. Following the vicomte's carriage were groups of nobles and frac habillés. But compared to the gorgeous viscount, they were dressed a little more plainly. This was the baron's phalanx. 1,240 baron were all riding fine horses, but there were obvious differences between the types of horses. Some of the barons were riding tall, strong and shiny black horses. They were members of the Burning Legion, and their mounts were purebred black blood horses. Some of the barons were riding shorter black horses. These were the mounts of the noble barons, and their mounts were mixed black blood horses. There were also some baron riding brown, yellow, and red horses. Those were the mounts of the lifelong baron, and the mounts were just ordinary war horses. Although the barons weren't sitting in the carriages, their majestic posture on the war horses was even more majestic. Many people on both sides of the Gilt Avenue cheered, especially the daughters of some merchants and craftsmen, who frequently winked at the knight on the horse. They didn't dare to dream of becoming a viscount, but they could still dream of becoming a baron. Behind the baron was the lord's phalanx. Not all of the tens of thousands of lords came. After all, they still had to shoulder the local management work, so only 500 representatives were present. The team of nearly 2,000 people set foot on the Gilt Avenue and kept moving forward. Soon they arrived at the triumphal arch in the center of the Fire Kingdom. There were mages casting magic on the triumphal arch. Colorful magic rose into the sky, causing the residents of the kingdom to exclaim. It was like fireworks on earth. Not only was it beautiful, but there was no smoke. It was environmentally friendly and natural. Passing through the triumphal arch, they continued along the gilt avenue to the north. Soon the team arrived at the square of the Palace of Stars. The square was next to the Fire Kingdom, and civilians were usually not allowed to enter. However, on this day of celebration, the square was allowed to be open to the public, so a large number of civilians and families of nobles poured in early. In a society with a strict hierarchy, there was an obvious barrier between the nobles and civilians. The nobles gathered in a separate area and kept a distance from the civilians. No civilians dared to cross this gap. Even ignorant children would be pulled back by their parents in time. When the parade team arrived at the square, they had to go through a procedure, which was to park their carriages and horses, and then return to the square to gather. When the sun rose high in the sky, around 9 in the morning, a new round of performances by the orchestra and choir began. At this moment, a large number of nobles, mages, and envoys from various countries poured out of the palace and entered the already prepared grandstand. Among them there were 3 that made a shocking entrance. Leading the way was Emily Flame, the Light Emerald Dragon Knight. She rode the Light Emerald Dragon Ethan and flew to the palace square. Then she circled around and landed Ethan in the middle of the square. She jumped off the dragon. Ethan flapped his wings and let out a loud dragon roar. He flew out of the square and landed on the Moon Mountain not far away. Under many admiring and jealous gazes, Emily walked to the grandstand and sat on the seat with her name written on it. Next was the shocking Duke of Tulip Island, Lee William Tulip. He didn't ride his broken-horned storm dragon horse. Instead, he stepped on Nimia's head and walked to the edge of the square. Then he jumped into the square and sat on his seat. Nimia also let out a roar and squatted on an empty space not far from the square. He stared at the square and gave the crowd endless pressure. The third to appear was Magic Shooter Laird Truth. He sat cross-legged on a shining golden carpet and flew into the square with his body covered in golden light. In that instant he used light magic and almost blinded everyone's eyes. When the crowd got used to it, he had already sat down. Obviously. These three's flashy entrance was requested by List to increase the atmosphere for the Fire Kingdom's founding ceremony. It's really grand. Alexander White Iron, the envoy of the Eagle Kingdom, looked at the dragon of his former kingdom, Nimia the lion and Magic Shooter. He was full of complaints but couldn't complain. He could only secretly criticize. On the surface, he still had to smile and chat with the envoy of the Blast Furnace Kingdom beside him. I wonder when His Majesty will appear. The envoy of the Blast Furnace Kingdom was just about to reply. Suddenly, a majestic and domineering dragon roar rose from the direction of the palace. The sound seemed to be able to penetrate the sky and earth and instantly silenced the entire square. Roar. Chapter 1074. Fire Dragon. It's the sound of the Fire Dragon. His Majesty's first dragon. Is His Majesty coming out? Everyone in the square was looking forward to it. However, to their surprise, after this roar, the Fire Dragon did not appear. Instead, a loud dragon roar sounded from behind the palace. Roar. It's the sound of an orichalcum dragon. There was no need to remind them. Soon, someone with sharp eyes pointed to the sky above the palace. Dragon. 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 Shockingly, a golden dragon flew over. Ah, shining gold. Is it a gold dragon? Don't you recognize it? It's His Majesty's orichalcum dragon, a magical metal dragon. It's even more noble than the gold dragon. Dragons are all noble. There's no distinction between them. The shining golden orichalcum dragon Marta quickly flew above the square. Like the light emerald dragon Ethan, it circled around and flew directly to Mount Sun, stopping halfway up the mountain. Everyone's amazement had not ended. At this time, another majestic dragon roar sounded. Roar. Immediately after, a silver-white dragon flew over. Those who knew dragons exclaimed. It was the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn. Orn circled around and flew to Mount Moon, not far from Ethan. He squatted on the mountainside and looked in the direction of the square. Roar. Once again, accompanied by the dragon's roar, a slightly smaller grayish-white dragon flew over. This was the aluminum dragon Connor. It circled around the square and flew to the mountainside of Mount Sunday. Roar. Following the aluminum dragon, another beautiful young dragon with light blue scales flew into the square with a slightly childish roar. Many people were confused. They could not recognize this dragon. Especially the envoys from various countries, they were even more shocked. There was information on the few dragons that had appeared before, so it was not out of the ordinary. However, This beautiful young dragon was exposed to the public for the first time. So it was obvious. This was another new dragon. How is this possible? Fire dragon, formless dragon, orichalcum dragon, gray iron dragon, light green gem dragon, aluminum dragon, bone dragon. Including this dragon list already has 8 dragons? Alexander White Iron unconsciously swallowed his saliva, and his palms began to sweat. The current Eagle Kingdom was not considered a vassal state, and there were only 8 dragons in the dragon nest. The newly established Fire Kingdom had already caught up with the Eagle Kingdom in terms of the number of dragons. Most importantly, the Fire Kingdom still had the Holy Dragon. How terrifying. The expression of the envoy from the Blast Furnace Kingdom beside Alexander also changed. Although the Blast Furnace Castle was quite far away from the Fire Kingdom, the rapidly developing Fire Kingdom still made the emissary feel great pressure. Even the Empire would be nervous about the speed of the dragon. Only the envoy from the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, Mashu Red White Rose, was overjoyed. List is stronger than I thought. When he becomes my brother-in-law, the Red White Rose family will have 2 royal families as their backing, and the power of the royal family should not be any different. Since childhood, she was used to throwing money at everything she wanted. Mashu took it for granted that the Red White Rose family could rely on wealth to stand side by side with the royal family. Your Excellency, what dragon is this? The Marquis of the P Island, D. Maria Uwashi, was also surprised when he saw the new young dragon. He had never seen this dragon before. This is already the 8th dragon of His Majesty. His Majesty's glory is incredible. William Lee smiled and replied reservedly, "It's normal that you have not seen it before. It is an elemental dragon, a water dragon. Water dragon Wout. It is still too young and has a bad temper, so it has been left in the sea by List." Water dragon Wout was originally List's hidden trump card. However, after touching the barrier, he began to breed a smoke dragon, which made him understand that he was invincible in the world. No matter how the 3 empires planned, it would be useless, so there was no need to hide. He might as well show off all the dragons at the founding ceremony to increase his prestige. Just like that. The appearance of Water Dragon quickly caused an uproar among the nobles, but it did not give them much time to calm down. Water Dragon circled over the square and directly landed on the top of the Moon Mountain. Its body was very small, and there was enough space for it to sit on the top of the mountain, so it did not need to squeeze into the middle of the mountain. Soon, another familiar dragon roar was heard. A sharp, high-pitched wee-ya suddenly exploded in the sky above the square. The civilians were so scared that they almost peed their pants. Even the nobles on the viewing platform almost lost their composure. This dragon roar was too sudden, as if it had exploded right next to their ears. When the people came back to their senses, the invisible dragon Bard appeared, circled in the sky, flew to the top of the Sun Mountain, and settled on the top of the mountain. Its flowing crystal-like body was dazzling to the eyes. Seeing that the holy dragon had appeared alone, but List had yet to appear, some people could not help but mutter, "His Majesty did not appear on the holy dragon. How strange." Yes, the fire dragon and the bone dragon have not appeared. Is His Majesty going to ride the fire dragon? No matter how noble the fire dragon is, it is not as noble as the holy dragon. Moreover, the fire dragon is an evil dragon. In the eyes of many people, dragons were the symbol of nobility. No matter what kind of dragon it was, the holy dragon was obviously more noble than the elemental dragon. The invisible dragon Bard could be said to be the only holy dragon that had appeared in the legendary continent. Before Bard appeared, many people, including the dragon-rearing families, did not believe in the existence of the holy dragon. Maybe His Majesty is nostalgic. His first dragon was the fire dragon. Even the Fire Kingdom and his surname were named after the fire dragon. That's true, the Fire Kingdom. If not for nostalgia, His Majesty would not have named the country on the sea like this. The discussion lasted for a long time, because after Bard appeared, no new dragon appeared. Currently, the fire dragon Leo and the bone dragon Winnie had not appeared. They should have already digested the dragon show ceremony that I have carefully arranged. Achi, please follow me to put a perfect end to the dragon show ceremony. In the back mountain of the Palace of Stars, the fire dragon Leo was squatting on the ground. On its back, Achi and List were holding hands. Achi was followed by Charlie the Unicorn, and List was wearing the bone dragon armor. Yes. Achi revealed a sweet smile. There was a tinge of shyness in her pure smile, and there was a touch of sweetness in her clear eyes. She had grown up. After List's kiss, the siren girl quickly revealed a fragrance that was about to bloom. Snort. Charlie the unicorn snorted in disdain behind him. It seemed to have a deep prejudice against vulgar humans like Liszt, who violated the purity that it recognized. However, it did not choose to leave Achi. Perhaps the purity that it recognized was just a mentality, a pure state of mind, or perhaps it was already used to its current life. "Let's go, Liszt, Achi, don't waste time." A slightly childish reproach sounded. It was the thorn sprite Ella, dressed in gorgeous frackabier, who flew over at some point. Liszt and Achi looked at each other and smiled. "Let's go." Achi rode on Charlie the unicorn, and Liszt rode on Leo's dragon-tooth platform and flew high into the sky together. At this moment the Dragon Knight Liszt, Flame and the magic shooter Achi Roids, Truth, who founded the Fire Kingdom, officially appeared. "Wow!" Ella shouted, flapped a pair of transparent wings, and hurriedly landed on Liszt's shoulder. "Wait for me." Chapter 1075. A huge black and red figure rose from the back of the Palace of Stars, the Palace of Sun, the Moon, and the flames seemed to form a circle around the fire dragon, like a rising sun. Although there was already a golden sun in the sky, Leo's appearance made the palace square, which was full of whispers, fall into silence. All the nobles and civilians looked at the domineering fire dragon above the Palace of Stars, which was comparable to the red sun. "His Majesty is out." Some sharp-eyed people saw Liszt riding on the back of the fire dragon, wearing a white armor that flashed with faint blue light. "And magic shooter, His Highness." Some people saw the unicorn beside the fire dragon, as well as the figure almost wrapped in a magic cloak on the back of the unicorn. Although the unicorn was much smaller than the fire dragon, the bright light didn't dim at all. The fire dragon flew closer and closer like a red sun. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived at the palace square and landed on the open space. Its huge body smashed on the rocks on the ground, causing the whole square to tremble. The materials of the palace were strengthened with magic and mixed with rubber water. As long as it wasn't a powerful attack, it wouldn't be damaged. Bah! Wearing the bone dragon armor, Liszt carried the bone dragon sword and jumped off the dragon's back. He nodded at Leo, and the fire dragon flew back into the sky and landed on the mountainside of Moon Mountain. This wasn't the end. The bone dragon armor on Liszt suddenly turned into a ball of faint blue light and fell to the periphery of the square. As the light flashed, a bone dragon stood on the open space. The blue flames in the dragon's eye sockets trembled, giving people a chilling feeling. The next moment, the bone dragon Winnie squatted down, like the giant lion Nimia on the other side of the square. It firmly guarded the safety of the palace square. The 8 dragons were all in place, making the Sun Mountain, Moon Mountain, and the Palace of Stars look like a holy place on Earth, a holy place for dragons. It was dazzling and bright. Achi flipped off Charlie the unicorn. Charlie stepped lightly in the void and walked into the Palace of Sun, Moon, and Stars without looking back. It was not Liszt's mount, and it disdained Liszt's ostentatious display. Sending Achi over was already the most benevolent thing he could do. There was no need to continue supporting Liszt. After the powerful creatures either lined up or left, the people in the square once again looked at the man and woman who were holding hands. Holding hands was a very common etiquette among the nobles. They were walking to the podium. The petite Achi was not conspicuous because of the magic cloak. However, Liszt, who was tall and had a height of 1.93 meters, appeared to be particularly proud and otherworldly. In particular, he wore a jeweled crown on his head. The jeweled crown was usually kept by Achi, and it could be used as a crown for the king at critical moments. 36 large and small gems of different colors decorated the crown so luxuriously that it could steal all the attention at a glance. Beneath the crown was thick golden hair with a bit of natural curls. His extraordinarily handsome face was enough to make most women go crazy with jealousy. When Liszt was young, his face was still childish. However, Liszt, who was now 24 years old, had completely shed his childishness, and his face was full of determination and noble temperament. About half a year ago he tried to grow a beard. It was not a very thick beard. Both sides of his face were clean, and there was only a circle around his lips and chin. This circle of beard gave him the charm of a mature man and added a lot of the majesty of a king. He was wearing a tuxedo-style gown. It was not black and white, but gold, red, and black. Ordinary people could not match such gorgeous colors at all. However, a good figure and temperament, coupled with the clever design of the tailor, allowed Liszt to control it perfectly. This was not the traditional costume of the nobles, nor was it the exaggerated frac habit of other kings, so in the eyes of the people in the square, it was a little strange. Only the authority and temperament of Liszt quickly made people ignore the awkwardness of the new style of gown. Their eyes eagerly watched their king step by step on the high platform of power. Many people also found that behind Liszt was the swaggering thorn elf Ella. Ella was very famous. Everyone knew that it was Liszt's first elf. In many fabricated biographies of Liszt, Ella appeared more frequently. However, no one cared about Ella. They thought that Ella could follow Liszt, but Liszt was nostalgic. It was not that Ella itself was special. You know, Liszt had 3 dragon elves. Ella was just a big elf. Of course, Ella did not think so. It tried to stick out its chest and followed Liszt with pride, as if it was the protagonist who was about to receive the cheers of the crowd. Wow! I must maintain a noble image, Liszt. You go to the side, don't block my flight path. Liszt did not hear Ella's whisper. Even if he had carefully prepared for such an occasion, he was still excited and unable to calm down. Trying to maintain a calm posture, he sent a chi to her position on the viewing platform, then turned around and gave Ella to a chi. Don't make trouble, Ella. After giving Ella a scolding in his heart, he walked to his own high platform of power. Facing the viewing platform and the entire palace square, he took a deep breath. He pulled up the king's scepter from the high platform and held it in his hand. This was a scepter made of magic metal alloy. There was no special ability. It was just a valuable decoration. But it symbolized the power of the king and would be passed down from generation to generation. Taking a deep breath, Liszt raised the king's scepter high. Then he announced in an unquestionable tone, "My people, I am your king, Liszt Flame." Boom. As soon as Liszt began his self-introduction, the entire square suddenly exploded. Everyone began to cheer wildly, whether nobles or civilians. The huge explosion of cheers quickly drowned out everything like a sudden tsunami, battering Liszt, who was standing tall. He stretched out his right hand and pressed it down, motioning the crowd to stop. However, waves of cheers came one after another, and there was no sign of stopping. The shocking scene of the 8 dragons had long been pushed to the climax by this ceremony. The people who had been excited for a long time needed a point to vent. Liszt's speech was such a point. If it was another king, he might wait for the people to vent their enthusiasm before giving a lengthy speech. But Liszt was not an ordinary king. He was the powerful dragon knight who founded the Flame Kingdom. He was a knight who had touched the existence of the barrier. He did not have the habit of waiting. When he wanted the people to calm down, then this will would not easily be shaken. Roar! 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 A dragon's roar suddenly sounded from the Sun Mountain and the Moon Mountain. This sound pierced through the sky and shook the clouds. It quickly swept through the palace square, and in an instant, it easily covered the cheers of the people in the square. When the dragon's roar dissipated, no one in the square dared to cheer anymore. Only Liszt's clear voice could be heard slowly. It clearly spread to everyone's ears, as the only master of the sea, the lord of all the islands, the invisible dragon knight, the fire dragon knight, the water dragon knight, the bronze dragon knight, the gray iron dragon knight, the bone dragon knight, and the aluminum dragon knight, I announced to everyone in the legendary continent. Chapter 1076. I hereby announce to everyone in the legendary continent that the Fire Kingdom will rise from the Eastern Sea and inherit the glory of the ancient civilizations, the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire. Today, on the first day of the first month of the first year of the Fire Calendar, we will officially become the new kingdom of the legendary continent. We will believe in the glory of the night, protect the character of justice, carry on the past and protect the people of the kingdom. Liszt used a dignified tone to clearly announce the oath that he had written earlier, and it was transmitted to the ears of every single person in the palace square. After saying that, he communicated with his own dragon telepathically and let out all kinds of dragon roars. Roar, 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 yo roar, woo-ya, and so on. The silent crowd also cheered. The fireworks team of mages who had long been ready around the square released all kinds of magic spells using magic equipment. The sky suddenly became colorful, and all kinds of beautiful magic spells bloomed, pleasing to the eye. The corner of Liszt's mouth curled up slightly as he held the king's scepter in his hand and walked towards his throne on the platform. The throne was also specially made of magical metal alloy. It was nothing special but luxurious. While the crowd was still cheering, the palace servants and night squires quickly walked into the square. They packed up all kinds of props that were no longer needed and rearranged the palace square to welcome the next step of the founding ceremony. Liszt also took the opportunity to take a sip of water. He also took out the script book that he carried with him and glanced at it. When the cheers gradually died down, the whispers quickly grew louder. After the excitement, the nobles and civilians were all passionately discussing the dragon exhibition ceremony and the king's speech. The kingdom has finally been established. From now on, we can truly call ourselves the Flame People. Yes, there are no more Eagle men, Moonkiller men, or Sapphire men. We are all Fire men, the subjects of the great King List. His Majesty's speech is too outstanding. Our Fire Kingdom has actually inherited the great civilizations of the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire. I know about the Moon Empire, but what is the Sun Empire? It doesn't matter what it is. Moon Sunday. I can tell that the Sun Empire is as great as the Moon Empire. The light on His Majesty's body is so bright that I can't open my eyes. A kingdom? I've actually witnessed the birth of a great kingdom in my lifetime. I've even been fortunate enough to participate in it and become a founding noble of the kingdom. Account on the viewing platform sighed emotionally. Last year he had been a captive, but this year he had become a founding count. His Majesty List has become a legend in the legendary continent, said a messenger from the duchy. A noblewoman with starry eyes clutched her chest and almost fainted from excitement. Although I don't agree with His Majesty's taste in clothes, his noble temperament is intoxicating. I really hope I can have the chance to dance with His Majesty. I also want to ride a dragon. A commoner boy clenched his fist. His name was Jim, and he had migrated to Blazing Island with his mother during the Development War last year. He was already studying at the Knight Academy. Life on Flame Island is too blissful. Thank you, His Majesty, he will always protect us. His Majesty is the greatest knight. Countless praises came from people of various statuses. However, not everyone was influenced by the king's speech. At least, the Eagle Kingdom's emissary, Alexander White Iron, had been deeply worried since the beginning of the dragon exhibition ceremony. It had a dragon. Although the founding ceremony is fancy, there is no doubt about List's strength. Adonis asked me to examine the Fire Kingdom. How should I report to him? List had already displayed an unimaginable foundation at the founding ceremony. Any country with an 8-headed dragon would be able to do whatever they wanted. Alexander knew King Adonis's plan. It was to show weakness to the enemy and then deal a fatal blow. However, it was easy to show weakness, but where would the fatal blow come from? Kill List? A dragon knight who could subdue an 8-headed dragon and a dragon knight who could escape the Empire's assassination. How unfathomable was the strength of such a dragon knight? With such a dragon knight and an 8-headed dragon guarding, it was unrealistic to expect the Blazing Kingdom to collapse easily. The first to bear the brunt of the Blazing Kingdom is my Eagle Kingdom. The Iron and Steel Ridge and the Blast Furnace Castle can still survive, but where can my Eagle Kingdom hide? There were cheers all around, but Alexander was silent. However, he was not alone. Beside him, the Blast Furnace Castle Kingdom's envoy was also silent. Unlike Alexander's worries, although this envoy was also wary, he was thinking more about how to maintain the structure of the 4 kingdoms in the northeast of the legendary continent. The triangle was the most stable structure. The people in this world did not study geometry, so they probably did not know this truth. However, people with a little political acumen would guess that it was easy for 3 kingdoms to coexist. Whichever kingdom was stronger, the other 2 kingdoms could unite and avoid being swallowed. However, there would be many variables in 4 kingdoms. The Blast Furnace Castle Kingdom was powerful, but they had to consider more. List did not care about what the dragon exhibition ceremony and the king's speech had made the envoys think. He quickly signaled for the founding ceremony to enter the next process, the enfeoffment of nobles. The lords were the first to be enfeoffed. As there were too many people, naturally there was no need for List to complete the enfeoffment ceremony personally. He only needed to follow the lines written in the script book and say a few words. My followers, the war is over, but tomorrow still needs to be protected. Looking at the night lined up, List was in high spirits. I will repay courage with glory, loyalty with love, and betrayal with revenge. Witness the glory of the night. Platter. A group of knight knelt on both knees, straightened their bodies and looked at List. More than a dozen clerks from the palace held all the prepared materials and handed them to each lord according to the list, including badges, clothing, civilized sticks, and proof of fief. When all the nobles wore the badges on their chests, List solemnly glanced around and said, "In view of your performance on the battlefield, charging bravely and fearlessly, obtaining glorious glory, and bringing a lot of military achievements for the Fire Kingdom. Now, as the King of the Fire Kingdom, I confer you the title of Lord of the Kingdom. You will be in charge of fief, provide for night, and drive for me." The knights stood up one after another and solemnly performed the knight's oath of allegiance. They loudly echoed, "I will be in charge of fief, provide for knight, and drive for my lord." Just like that, the enfeoffment ceremony was completed. The lords left one by one and returned to their original positions on the viewing platform. After the lords, it was the turn of the baron. The same lines, the same process. Soon these more than 1,000 baron also returned to their original positions. After that it was the 366 viscounts. Slightly different from the enfeoffment ceremony for baron and lord, the enfeoffment ceremony for viscounts was the addition of the king's roll call. The clerks were responsible for distributing the enfeoffment materials. Liszt read the enfeoffment of the viscounts in a clear voice. "Blair Steele, as the king of the Fire Kingdom, I confer you the title of Viscount of the Three Leaves County." Blair, who had followed Liszt since the Flower Town, excitedly performed the knight's oath of allegiance and responded, choking with sobs, "I will be in charge of the Three Leaves County, provide for knight, and drive for my lord." Liszt nodded slightly. Liszt then went before the next Viscount and read in a clear voice, "Isaiah Moss, as the king of the Fire Kingdom, I confer you the title of Viscount of the Drizzle County." Every time the enfeoffment was read, a Viscount loudly responded with an oath of allegiance. This lengthy yet solemn scene made the blood of the commoners and lesser aristocrats watching the nation-building ceremony boil. In particular, the children who were still young couldn't wait to immediately run home to cultivate chi and become a glorious knight. They would make contributions on the battlefield and receive the king's enfeoffment. Just like the dazzling viscounts and aristocrats on the scene, they would receive the attention of the audience. The Nine Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1077. After pondering for a long time, he did not know what to write next. To be honest, the excitement of writing "The Big Dragon is Dead" had long passed. Now, Lao Bai was purely trying to come up with a complete ending for the book and was holding on. It was estimated that there were 300,000 words left, or even less, for the book to come to an end. But don't worry, Lao Bai would not leave a bad ending. He would make a beautiful arrangement for Liszt and bring this somewhat anticlimactic farming story to a successful conclusion. Finally, there are no updates today. My state is really terrible. I'm very sorry. "The Big Dragon is Dead" applies for leave. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1078. Even if it was just the reading of everyone's name and a sentence, the ceremony of conferring viscounts still lasted for a full 2 hours. In addition to the previous night parade, the dragon exhibition ceremony, and the king's speech, it was already 10 o'clock in the morning. The process of the founding ceremony in the palace square had been completed, and it began to move to the palace of the sun, moon, and stars to begin the conferring of counts and marquises. It was not much different from the process of conferring viscounts, baron, and lord. It was just that each count and marquis was more long-winded. In this way, 21 marquises and 64 counts rushed to successfully complete the conferring ceremony before noon. The Fire Kingdom is newly established. The founding nobles are not only lords, baron, viscounts, counts, and marquises, but also 3 dukes. Lee William Tulip, Duke of Tulip Island, Piero Greyiron, Duke of Sycamore Island, and Bruce Bossy, Duke of the Saltwater Sea, who was unable to participate in the ceremony. Liszt presided over the conferring ceremony for the whole morning. His mouth was dry and his mind was in a mess. His earlier excitement and agitation had been worn away, but he still forced himself to finish the last part of the ceremony. "We will hold a separate conferring ceremony for the 3 dukes, and now it's time for the luncheon. Everyone please join me and enjoy it." The luncheon was held in the palace hall. All the nobles participated in the banquet together. Only the high-ranking nobles and envoys from various countries gathered together, the middle-ranking nobles gathered together, and the low-ranking nobles gathered together. There was no such thing as equality for everyone. The hierarchy under the knight system was so strict, but no one would complain. On the contrary, the low-ranking nobles would only be extremely envious and eager to squeeze into the circle of the high-ranking nobles. The knight class had always been synonymous with forging ahead. At least in the new Fire Kingdom, the knight had not yet decayed and kept forging ahead. The grand founding ceremony came to a perfect end with the end of the luncheon. However, the impact of the ceremony quickly spread from within. The nobles of the fief had already left Flame Island with the serfs and followers that had been assigned long ago, and returned to their own fief. In particular, a group of high-ranking nobles took away a large number of serfs, reducing the population of Flame Island from 5 million to 3 million. Among them, 2 million were direct subjects of List, and the remaining 1 million were subjects of the feudal nobles. The feudal nobles did not have the right to enfeoffment, but they could provide for the knight. The nobles of the city, the Knight of the Burning Legion, had taken over the management of many cities. However, there were still many more cities that were still under List's name. After losing a large number of people, these cities needed a large number of people to replenish their various industries. In the era of automation and industrialization, population was the most important labor force. List had just been excited for a day, but he was already tied down by a large number of kingdom affairs. Even though he had established the outer cabinet and the inner cabinet, there were still many decisions that he had to make. Your Majesty, Father, just call me List. There's no need to consider the title of king between us. After all, List's soul was that of an earthling, and he could not adapt to the relationship of a father becoming a follower of his son, even though he knew that such a situation also happened in ancient China. He vaguely remembered that the Qing dynasty was still the Ming dynasty. There was an emperor who did not have a son, so he adopted a child from the royal family as his heir. After this child inherited the throne, because he could not deal with his biological father, he started a mighty battle with the ministers. Fortunately, the Fire Kingdom was created by List, and he could set the rules however he wanted. Li William showed a gratified smile, although he did not mind bowing down to his son. Under the knight system, this was not a problem. However, List's attitude made him quite satisfied and proud. List, now that the feudal nobles have moved out, Fire Island will soon fall into a problem of population shortage. What is the Outer Cabinet's solution? The Outer Cabinet has discussed it several times, but no decision has been made. But in conclusion, there are two solutions. The first one is to stop the new city plan and stabilize the developed cities. When the population has increased, then we can consider the new city construction. The second one is to immediately launch a war to plunder the population. List thought for a moment and did not respond directly. Instead, he asked, "How far is the joint plan with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom going?" Li William shook his head and replied somewhat helplessly, "Although the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family has decided to cooperate with our country and divide up the Eagle Kingdom, the specific details and the distribution of interests cannot be finalized in a short period of time. Contact King Osborne directly and let him urge the nobles under him. The war should be started as soon as possible. We cannot give the Eagle Kingdom a chance to react. Osborne has a false appearance. On the surface he appears to be a bold and ambitious king, but in fact he is also an overcautious and conservative person. According to the information sent by the blood servant from the City of Steel, Osborne held several meetings to discuss it. The ministers quarreled, but there was still no concrete result. What a waste. Rotten wood cannot be carved. List could not help but curse. I am in charge of the dragon-slaying battle, he is in charge of the night charge, and the Eagle Kingdom is divided in half. No matter how simple the arithmetic problem is, it still takes so long to consider. The whole plan has been going on for more than a year, hasn't it? It has been a year and a half. I personally went to the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom to finalize the plan, Li William said. What a procrastinator. If it were not for the fact that I did not have enough night to annex the entire Eagle Kingdom, I would have taken my dragon and directly attacked them. This sentence was not a boast. At the level of the Dragon Knight he was already invincible. It was just that the strength of his subordinates was too weak. It was too risky for the Fire Kingdom to annex the Eagle Kingdom alone. It was possible that they would not only face the Eagle Kingdom, but also the Iron and Steel Ridge, the Blast Furnace Castle, and even several other neighboring kingdoms. It was hard to say whether the Eagle Kingdom would ask for help. After all, the Eagle royal family had once revealed the news of the Holy Dragon to the noble Frost Empire. Anything could happen if they were pushed too hard. Only by involving the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and giving out some benefits to appease the neighboring kingdoms, could they successfully annex the Eagle Kingdom. Li William suddenly said, "List, there is one point worth discussing. The appearance of the eight-headed dragon at the founding ceremony. I am worried that as your deterrence further increases, the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family may very likely give up the cooperation." Father, do you mean that Osborne might be frightened by the speed of my dragon? That's right. You rode the Holy Dragon, the Fire Dragon, the Magical Metal Dragon, and now you're riding the Water Dragon. It's only been a few years. Every time you ride a dragon, the three kingdoms will be more wary of you. What I'm more worried about is that the three kingdoms may have secretly begun to ally with each other. Is there any sign? Not yet, but I dare not rule out this possibility. List frowned. This possibility was indeed not impossible. If he was the king of the three kingdoms, he would also be extremely afraid of himself. The royal families of the three kingdoms had accumulated for hundreds and thousands of years to gather a few dozen dragons, but he himself had only spent a few years. Thinking of this, he slightly reflected and sighed, "It seems that I have indeed been too high profile. The next time I ride a dragon, I should raise it on an uninhabited island. It is not advisable to expose it too much." The Duke of Tulip Island, who was beside him, pretended not to care and picked up his teacup and took a sip of tea. Chapter 1079. In any case, the success or failure of the plan to unite the Steel Ridge Kingdom was still uncertain. The lack of population had always been a huge problem for the Fire Kingdom, and List, who was bent on doing things quickly, was not willing to slow down the development plan. Therefore, the best way was to launch a war for the expansion order. However, the content of the expansion order has to be innovated. Plundering the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom once a year is too frequent. List said. He naturally understood that you couldn't just grab a place and pull it. You had to move to another place to continue pulling it. If we can't plunder the Eagle Kingdom, we can only plunder the Snow Wind Duchy, Lee Williams said. Then inform Marquis Yevich Waterpeanut of Realgar City and Marquis Amat of Thorn's left territory to speed up the attack on the Snow Wind Duchy. Before June, I need to send back at least 500,000 serfs from the Snow Wind Duchy. The more night the better. The Snow Wind Duchy was not a large duchy. It was located on a plateau and was very barren. Its population was only 6 or 7 million. When the civil war between the first prince and the second prince had just started, Yevich had already cooperated with his father-in-law Amat to secretly transfer more than 500,000 people to the Fire Kingdom. Now they had to transfer more than 500,000 people. In just a year, the population would be reduced by 1/5. In addition, the Yellowstone Plain Kingdom was also secretly pulling the wool. Perhaps by the time the two princes decided the winner, the Snow Wind Duchy would only have half of its population left. Of course, this had nothing to do with List. He was only concerned about the development of the Fire Kingdom. Then I'll go arrange it. By the way, Father, I plan to hold your dukedom enfeoffment ceremony on January 15th. I'll have the palace prepare for the ceremony. Father, you can just wait for the 15th. I'm not picky. Any time is fine. Lee Williams' calm face revealed an unconcealable smile. Once upon a time, he was just a count of the Sapphire Duchy, struggling to become a marquis. He thought that before his chi was exhausted, being promoted to a marquis would be a blessing of the knight's glory. However, with the rise of his second son, List, his dream became within reach. Unknowingly, he had already obtained the title of marquis and obtained the domain knight's secret book, becoming an existence below the Dragon Knight. Strength and ambition always complemented each other. However, it hadn't been long since his ambition had been aroused. Just as he had begun to look forward to the position of Duke, the position of Duke had already arrived. Everything seemed like a dream. When he left the Palace of Stars, he felt as if he was floating. Of course, a domain knight could fly in the air for a long time. His mount, the storm dragon horse with a broken horn, was pacing back and forth in the palace square. The broken horn on the head of this super dragon was much more magnificent. Not only was the main body made of magical metal alloy, but it was also embedded with fine gems and engraved with magical runes. It was custom-made by the Magic Association. It was equivalent to a powerful piece of magical equipment. William mounted the horse and shouted, "White Dragon Horse, let's go." The broken horn storm dragon horse immediately flapped its wings and soared into the sky like a bolt of lightning, charging towards the Flame Royal City. A moment later, he stopped in front of the tall, stately building of King City's administrative office. The entire administrative office was a 6-story building from the Victorian era. It faced the triumphal arch and was painted gold. It was very eye-catching. The building was very long and divided into 3 sections. The first section was the bureaucracy of the King City, the second section was the bureaucracy of the cabinet, and the last section was the bureaucracy of the outer court. William's office was on the 6th floor. It was spacious and luxuriously decorated. He allowed his valet to take off his coat and went directly to his stone desk. He signaled to his assistant, "Summon the ministers of the outer court and hold a magic forum meeting. The time is set for 2:30 p.m. "Yes, sir." The female assistant, whose appearance could be rated 80 out of 100, twisted her slender waist and walked into the small meeting room that came with the office. She was tapping on a slightly larger and more complicated magic forum. Her fingers were slender and magic flowed at her fingertips. She was obviously a magician. Of course, the term magician in the Flame Kingdom was about to be abolished. She was now a registered arcanist. She specialized in communications and was specially trained to operate the magic forum. The magic forum lit up. Like a projector, it projected more than 10 screens on the walls of the meeting room. Very quickly, some of the screens turned from gray and white to color. Then, some people dressed like the female assistant appeared on the screen. Just like on Earth, from text communication to video communication, the magic forum also entered the video era after continuous development and improvement. The Flame Kingdom had already conquered the teleportation magic circle. Developing video communication didn't pose any technical difficulties. Achi used her free time to come up with a video communication plan and handed it over to the Magic Guild to design. However, the cost of the video magic forum was extremely high. Currently, the production was only enough for the cabinet and outer court members to use and train professional communication arcanists to operate it. Others couldn't touch it yet. Assistant Portia, is the Prime Minister calling for the Magic Forum meeting? A woman on the screen asked. Yes, Assistant Olivia. Please inform the First Minister of Internal Affairs to attend the Magic Forum meeting, the female assistant replied. I'll inform Sir Geoffrey now. However, he's currently patrolling the territory. He might need some time. The meeting will be held at 2:30 p.m. Please inform the First Minister of Internal Affairs. Yes. In this way, the female assistant notified the people on the screen one by one and determined the time of the Magic Forum meeting. When she finished the notification and was about to close the Magic Forum, Lee William came in with a glass of red wine. Portia, contact Tulip Castle for me. Yes, sir. Portia's assistant operated on the Magic Forum and soon projected another screen. However, when the Magic Forum was connected, the screen was still gray. Tulip Castle didn't have a video Magic Forum. In addition, Tulip Castle was a newly built Duke's Castle on Tulip Island. The Coral Island had been returned to the Sapphire Duchy. The former Tulip Castle had become a thing of the past. Only Black Horse Island was still in the form of an enclave, belonging to List. There were natural nodes on Black Horse Island. In the future, the magic teleportation circle would be open to increase control over the Sapphire Duchy. This is Tulip Castle. A male voice came from the Magic Forum. Although video communication couldn't be done, the ordinary Magic Forum had already been upgraded to voice communication. Levis? Lee William asked. Yes, sir, father. How is Loria's body? Very good. The medical arcanists are constantly observing. The twins in her belly are developing healthily. Levis's voice revealed excitement. This was Loria's second child. Yes. Lee William was also very happy. Although his 4-year-old grandson Richard had shown excellent talent, he still had expectations for the unborn twins. After all, with the example of List, who could guarantee that the second son wouldn't be a legend? In fact, since the rise of List, his legendary story had changed the embarrassing situation of many aristocratic second sons. It turned out that most aristocrats were indifferent to their second sons and let them do as they pleased. After all, the eldest son was the inheritance system. As long as the eldest son was cultivated, the family could continue. But now, while many aristocrats cultivated their eldest son, they were also willing to share resources to cultivate their second son. They didn't want to give birth to the next List. As long as the second son could make a little success, the cultivation would not be in vain. And List had also become an irreplaceable idol in the minds of many aristocratic second sons. Every day, a large number of aristocratic second sons from the 3 kingdoms and many duchies came to seek shelter from thousands of miles away. Many of the aristocrats in the city were such aristocratic second sons. Without family resources to use, they were completely dependent on List's support and became a vassal of the Flame family. After a pause, Lee Williams said indifferently, Levis, my nobility ceremony is on the 15th. You calculate the time yourself, bring grandmother and the others and rush to the Sun, Moon and Stars Palace. Nobility ceremony on the 15th? Please rest assured, Sir Father. I will arrange for my family and immediately rush to the Sun, Moon and Stars Palace. Levis laughed. Chapter 1080. My dear, the date of Lord Father's conferment has been set. It will be on the 15th of this month. Our Tulip family is about to become a Duke family. After ending the magic communication, Levis immediately went to his wife's room. He said excitedly to the pregnant Rolia Golden Wheat, this is really delightful news. From Sapphire to Flame Island, the Tulip family is finally going to enter a glorious moment. Rolia gently rubbed her belly. Although she was also smiling, she wasn't as excited as Levis. Isn't this already clear? Ever since Liszt promised to bestow Tulip Island to Lord Father, the title of Duke was already clear. Even if that's the case, I won't feel at ease if I don't wait for it. There's nothing to feel at ease about, Levis. You don't have to care too much about the details of the title, land, wealth, and so on. In the Fire Kingdom, you just need to follow Liszt closely. You are his elder brother. The deep bond between you two brothers is far more secure than any noble title. Don't worry, Lord Father is here. Levis didn't care at all. Rolia frowned slightly but quickly relaxed. The Tulip family will be handed over to you one day. You can't alienate Liszt. Levis was speechless. You always worry about these useless things. Rolia said seriously, Richard is already 4 years old. Levis, I have a decision. What is it? When the twins are born, I plan to ask Lord Father to send Richard to the Palace of Stars on Sunday. Firstly, he can accompany Lord Father. Lord Father is the Prime Minister of the Outer Pavilion. He will be staying in the Fire Kingdom more than in Tulip Castle. Secondly, he can receive training as a Knight of the Burning Legion as soon as possible. Is there a need for this, Rolia? Richard is only 4 years old. When I was 4, I was still peeing and playing with mud in the castle's garden. Yes. Rolia insisted. She announced this decision at the castle's banquet that night. After all, Madame Marie was not Levis's biological mother and did not express her opinion. Madame Penelope agreed, Rolia's decision is correct. Although I am reluctant to let little Richard leave Tulip Castle, he can always shine on Liszt's glory in the Palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars. Little Richard is very lucky to have a Dragon Knight as an uncle. Grandmother, it's just the basic training of a knight. Do you think that I, his father, can't teach him? No matter what, I'm a Sky Knight. How can a Sky Knight be compared to a Dragon Knight? Levis, you're already 30 years old, but you're still an ordinary Sky Knight. Don't you have any idea? Madame Penelope glanced at Levis. She used to be most satisfied with this eldest grandson, but now she only had eyes for Liszt. Cough cough. Levis coughed awkwardly. He really wanted to say that a 30-year-old Sky Knight was not a bad performance. However, his grandmother made an example of a legendary Dragon Knight like Liszt, who was as dazzling as the sun. This made him speechless. All the young geniuses in the northeast corner of the legendary continent lived in Liszt's shadow. Basically, Liszt was an existence that subverted everyone's perception. Seeing this, Rolia smiled and said, Let's ask Father's opinion when we reach the Fire King's city. 4-year-old Richard already has the ability to live without his parents. Although she said she wanted to ask William's opinion, everyone knew that Rolia had already made up her mind. Levis shrugged his shoulders. In fact, he understood Rolia's thoughts and knew that this would help Richard. He just felt that Richard was too young at the age of 4. However, when he turned his head and glanced at his son, who was sitting upright like an adult, he inexplicably felt that this might not be a bad thing. Rolia's discipline towards Richard was too strict. She basically did not allow him to play like a normal child. She had instilled aristocratic etiquette and the way to govern from the age of 2. This kind of childhood was scary just thinking about it. Thus, he spoke with the tone of the heir of the Tulip family and said in an unquestionable tone, I will bring Richard to inspect the construction of the manors in the next 2 days. You guys stay in the castle and pack your luggage. We will set off for the Fire King's city in 3 days. It had not been long since the founding of the kingdom and everything was busy. In the midst of the busy time, Liszt unexpectedly received a new letter from the magic platform. It was sent by the 6 mermaids that were traveling around the sea. Your Majesty, we have already started our return journey from the westernmost part of the legendary continent. The data of the coastline calculated by the sextant has already been packaged and sent back to the Guild of Magic. Apologies to you, there has been a delay in the year-long journey around the sea. However, although we did not find any mermaids, we have captured many sea elves, including 2 great elves. The magic platform's message was very long. It had already been recorded on a piece of paper by the communication arcanist. Liszt continued reading, We have discovered a few ruins of the Sea Kingdom. Unfortunately, it has been a long time and the Naga and clownfish have long disappeared. In the westernmost part of the legendary continent, we have also encountered a legendary sea monster, the Hydra. Unfortunately, it was too strong and we were unable to capture it. The mermaids reported what they had seen and heard in the past year of traveling around the sea in the form of essays. There was not much useful information. It was just the discovery of the Hydra, and the location of the coastline by the sextant, as well as the fact that the elves were worthy of attention. Reply to the mermaids. End the voyage as soon as possible and send the elves back. After reading the message, Liszt ordered, "By the way, send over the results of the kingdom's enfeoffment of Duke Burabosi and the other 6 marquises." He could not criticize the mermaids to hurry back to work, but he still had to warn them about their attitude. "Yes, Your Majesty." The arcanist in charge of the communication immediately bowed and left. After settling the urgent affairs at hand, Liszt quickly arrived at the Mage Tower. He had come to inquire about the progress of the coastline survey of the legendary continent. "Chris, you have received the location of the sextant sent by the mermaids. Has the map been drawn?" "Your Majesty, the rough sketch has been drawn." Chris gestured to the arcanist in charge of the mapping, who spread a map on the table. The map was huge, but it only had an incomplete outline and a small part of it had detailed records. "So this is the legendary continent." Liszt looked at the map. The coastline that had been drawn on the map outlined the legendary continent as an irregular shape. There was a large part of the northern part of the continent that did not have a coastline, because that was a place that the mermaids had not traveled to. However, the outline of the legendary continent had been drawn, and the geographical location and area of the 3 kingdoms in the northeast corner of the continent could be clearly compared. The area of the 3 kingdoms added together is only equivalent to 1/20th of the total area of the legendary continent. It is indeed an inconspicuous corner. The Flame Islands are here, the Sapphire Islands are here. And from the looks of it, the Eagle Kingdom is completely surrounded by the Steel Ridge, the Furnace Castle, and the Yellowstone Plain. As long as these 3 kingdoms are cleared, it will be easy to nibble away at it. Looking at the large blank area of the map, Liszt was already imagining how to conquer it. Sooner or later, his strength would not allow him to keep a low profile. Conquering the legendary continent gradually moved from the level of fantasy to the level of practical planning. Chapter 1081. The conferring ceremony of the Duke of Tulip Island, Lee William Tulip, was not too grand, especially with the extravagant scene of the founding of the nation. But to the Tulip family this was the most glorious moment. In the name of Lee William, a 3-day banquet was held in the Fire Kingdom, inviting a large number of nobles who stayed in the Fire Kingdom. After that, Levis and the rest returned to Tulip Island. Lee William continued to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, stationed in the Fire Kingdom. Levis's son Richard, who was also Liszt's nephew, stayed in the Palace of Sun, Moon and Stars. Liszt liked this nephew very much, so he would not refuse to nurture him. But he was busy and could not discipline him himself. There would be servants to take care of him, and there would be teachers from the Royal Knight Academy to teach him. "Chris, has the reform agenda of the Guild of Magic been decided?" Liszt came to the Mage Tower in Fireforge City again and asked the First Minister of Arcana, Chris Truth. "Your Majesty, after a few years of discussion, the registered mages of the Guild of Magic have completely adapted to the Arcanist system, so there is not much resistance to the reform. The plan to restructure the Guild of Magic into the Royal Arcana Academy has been approved by the Arcanist Assessment Committee." The Guild of Magic had been a product of excess from the beginning. Now that the Fire Kingdom had been established, it was time to change it according to Liszt's will. Referring to the American university system on Earth, Liszt's ideal scientific system was the integration of production, learning, and research. The Royal Knight Academy had been established to nurture elite knight, and it was similar to the National Defense University and West Point Military Academy. Now, the Royal Arcana Academy was to be established to nurture all kinds of arcanists and undertake magical research tasks. This way, an education system for both knight and arcanists could be formed. At the same time, education resources from all over the country would be integrated, and ordinary schools would be set up. Knight and arcanist courses would be set up to provide a continuous supply of talents for the kingdom. This was undoubtedly a little ahead of the time, and it was hard to say what impact it would have. However, Liszt did not care. His strength had broken through the horizon, and he already had the capital to do as he pleased. There was no other reason for him to do as he pleased. A dragon was just that willful. "Now that you've passed the assessment, let's finish the reorganization as soon as possible." "Well, since Achi and Laird don't want to manage the mundane affairs, you're the first Arcana Minister and the first Dean of the Royal Arcana Academy." Chris smiled and nodded. "As you wish, Your Majesty." After a pause, Chris asked again, "Then, Your Majesty, will the finances of the Royal Arcane Academy be provided by the kingdom, or by your internal court?" Bearing the burden of the kingdom meant that the local lords would have to pay taxes to bear the burden. The internal court had provided it, meaning that it was the Flame family's personal burden. Both sets of finances were List's money. It was just that the money was used for different purposes. One was the treasury, the money collected from taxes and used for the construction of the kingdom. The other was a private stash of money. The money earned from their fiefs could be spent as they pleased. The kingdom will bear the responsibility. List said expressionlessly. I'll gradually integrate the arcanists into the noble system. In the future, the Royal Arcane Academy will no longer be supported by me. The talents of the Arcane Academy will be shared by all the fiefs and nobles. Of course, the research results can also be shared. Scientific research was a bottomless pit, and so was magical research. He didn't want to pay for it alone. He could use the name of the Royal Arcane Academy to collect some taxes from the feudal nobles. Then he could throw in some careless research results to stop the nobles from complaining. I understand. So, will the Royal Arcane Academy be located in the Magic District of the Fire Kingdom? Yes. The Magic Guild was being reorganized into the Royal Arcane Academy. Mages who were obsessed with magical research had to take time out to go through all kinds of procedures to become teachers of the Royal Arcane Academy or to attach their own laboratories to the Arcane Academy. Applications for funds, staffing, and all kinds of messy things came one after another. Mages didn't have a good time, and so did the knight. As the fiefs and nobles took away a large number of knight and officials, the cities and towns had to send new knight to take over. In such a situation of national change, all kinds of unexpected situations were constantly happening. However, it did not affect the spring plowing work in the first year of the fire calendar. The serfs were short of hands and a large number of wasteland could not be cultivated. But at least there would be a large number of serfs rushing to plant the farmland cultivated by the elves. List's own farmland could also be allocated enough fertilizer to be spread. There is another important reason why the spring plowing work is not affected, is that there is a serious shortage of elves. In particular, the fiefs and nobles took away their elves, and a large number of plantations were abandoned. It can't be said to be abandoned, but the harvest depends on the glory of the night, said Lee William, Duke of Tulip Island, when reporting this year's spring plowing work. List nodded. The speed of elves breeding can't keep up, so the development order has to continue to be issued. We can't let go of the Eagle Kingdom. By the way, Father, has the envoy of the Steel Ridge Kingdom confirmed that King Osborne has clearly refused to join hands with me and divide the Eagle Kingdom? Yes, the Sapphire Duchy's change of allegiance to the Fire Kingdom has caused a greater impact than expected. King Osborne attaches great importance to the face of the aristocracy. Perhaps he is just taking advantage of the situation. Seeing that I am powerful, he is unwilling to join me in plotting the Eagle Kingdom, fearing that I will continue to grow stronger. List shook his head. Forget it, if he refuses then so be it. Recently, I have a vague feeling that there is a new dragon waiting for me to ride in this sea. Another one? Lee Williams stared. It's just a feeling, it's hard to say whether it's true or not. However, my strength has been steadily improving, so it's not surprising that there are one or two more dragons. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Since the disappearance of the smoke mission and the birth of the smoke dragon, he could take the initiative to stir the threads of fate. A while ago, the phoenix-perching parasol tree dragon elf Annie had told him that the two phoenix-perching parasol trees that had been the focus of attention had successfully bred two sprite worms. This was a powerful proof. It proved that he could take the initiative to attack and clearly arrange things around him. Recently, he felt that there was a new dragon in the Sea of the Flame archipelago. As long as he could stir the threads of fate with his will again, he would be able to grasp the new dragon in his hands. I am a child of glory. The glory of a knight is constantly guiding me. Father, I will leave the kingdom to you in the outer court. I will be away for a while to look for my new dragon. What else could Lee Williams say? Dragons were the greatest in the world. You can rest assured and look for the dragon. I will look after the kingdom for you. Thereupon, List quietly left the palace of sun, moon, and stars. He was not in a hurry to look for a new dragon. Instead, he went to the dragon pit mine and met the gray-mouthed iron dragon Aoun, who had made the dragon pit mine his dragon nest. Aoun, during this period of time, let's practice hard together and form a spirit imprint as soon as possible. Roar. Aoun responded. After the light emerald dragon Ethan and the fire dragon Leo, the invisible bard had recently reached perfection. His mind now had a clear and inextinguishable figure of List. As for the other dragons, the bone dragon Winnie could not form a spirit imprint. The little water dragon Walter and the aluminum dragon Connor still had no shadows. The mountain copper dragon Marta only had a shadow. Only in Aoun's mind, List's shadow was already indistinct. It was not far from perfection. After touching Aoun's scales, he could not help but ponder, how to stir the threads of fate is very particular. For example, stirring a sprite worm is a piece of cake. But to involve a dragon, I must follow the trajectory of the threads and borrow its strength. This was the formation mechanism of the smoke mission. In the smoke mission, the reward could only be obtained after completing the mission. This process was the most effortless way to stir the threads of fate. Now that List had transformed into a smoke dragon, he was merely turning the passive smoke mission into an active attack. Using his own will as the guide, he would proactively stir the threads of fate and obtain the content he wanted. When Aoun and I reach perfection, we will probably be able to take advantage of the situation to involve this new dragon. However, I can feel that there are many threads of fate in the surroundings, waiting for me to stir them one by one. Behind every thread of fate was a bountiful harvest. But I am only one person and cannot split myself. What a blissful worry. Chapter 1082. Happy New Year to everyone from DeLong is dead currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1083. Every time he trained with the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn, List could clearly feel that the power of destiny was pulling on the silk threads with greater strength. Destiny is indeed mysterious, but it's not so ethereal that it can't be captured. It also has a trajectory that needs to be followed. I may not understand what this trajectory is, but if I follow this feeling and operate according to the trajectory that the smoke dragon sensed, destiny will be a sword in my hand. Orn let out a dissatisfied roar. He was reminding List not to think about any other dragons when training with him. List didn't argue and just smiled. Understood, Orn. Let's continue. He concentrated on training with Orn, and one training session lasted for an entire day. His control of the dragon soul world had reached an extremely proficient level. With the power of destiny, he could calmly guide the dragon's soul. It was far faster and easier to imprint than any Dragon Knight's training. Up until now, the Sunfire Dragon Orn no longer needed to train frequently, and the Invisible Dragon Bard no longer needed to train. After all, these two dragons had already graduated and completed the soul imprint. Only the Mountain Copper Dragon Marta, the Aluminum Dragon Connor, and the Water Dragon Wouter had not made much progress. Therefore he spent most of the month with Orn, and the rest of the time was allocated to official duties. He presided over the transformation of the Fire Kingdom, from a grassroots government to a real kingdom. He set down various legal systems such as tax, justice, etiquette and so on. But it was only limited to the Fire Island, and he built a family-style fiefdom. He was already a powerhouse at the top of the world, and he didn't have such a big demand for centralized power. As the soul of a modern civilization on Earth, he was very clear that there was no country that could prosper forever. However, a family could last for thousands of years, so it was enough for the Fire family to last forever. During his reign, it didn't matter if it was centralized power or knight feudalism. Would his followers dare to disobey his orders? It was already March. List went to a cheese mage tower for a walk. This mage tower had just been built, and it was located in the valley behind the Palace of Stars, Moon and Palace of Stars. Originally, a Chi could have directly experimented in the Palace of Stars, Sun and Moon, but because of an explosion, many rooms in the Palace of Stars were destroyed and several servants were killed. Therefore, a Chi moved the laboratory out of the Palace of Stars and built it in the back of the mountain. An explosion here would at most kill a magician. As for a Chi herself, as the strongest magic shooter in history, even a Dragon Knight could not kill her, so a mere explosion was not even worth mentioning. Big brother, we finished studying the connection between the golden apple tree and the bloodline fruit. Through the activation of the magic array, we can release the power of the golden apple tree and infect the surrounding plants to form the bloodline fruit. If this golden apple tree is fully activated, it can produce over 100 bloodline fruits. Achi reported the results of her latest experiment. Back when he discovered the natural node on Wudong Island, the natural node was located in a large swamp. List named it Dreamy Cloud Swamp. 6 bloodline fruits grew on a piece of land in the Dreamy Cloud Swampland. Eventually he dug out a piece of golden apple wood. Achi had only recently found the time to study this piece of golden apple wood. Then let's hand it over to the Royal Arcana Academy as soon as possible and form a development team to cultivate it. List said to Chris, who was following behind him. Also, contact the cabinet and select suitable livestock in World of Warcraft as soon as possible. When the bloodline fruit ripens, immediately feed them and evolve them. Like magic potions, World of Warcraft meat was always scarce. It was impossible to feed so many knights with the little World of Warcraft meat that they hunted. All the big nobles would collect bloodline fruits and try to evolve their livestock into World of Warcraft meat. The low-level World of Warcraft meat that relied on bloodline fruits to evolve might be seriously lacking in strength, but its nutritional value would be greatly increased. Most importantly, it was easy to raise. List also needed a large amount of World of Warcraft meat to provide nutrition for his knight. However, he had something better than World of Warcraft meat: dragon meat. Black blood horses, Banpo cattle, and estuary boars were the first 3 types of dragon meat. Nowadays, Banpo cattle had been mass-produced on the grasslands of Flame Island, and the milk they produced was specially for big nobles and talented young knights. Estuary boars had also become an indispensable food for the Burning Legion. In addition, with the Invisible Dragon Bard's climax, every year, it had already provided a total of 17 space gems for List, accompanied by 6 new types of dragon meat: dragonhead fish, long-necked goose, hairy sheep, treehorn deer, big-eared elephant, and grass mud horse. Dragonhead fish were ordinary grass carps that had withstood the magic power of the dragon's bloodline and evolved. They had strong reproductive ability and high nutrition. The largest of them could grow up to 3 meters. They were simply the giants of freshwater. Long-necked goose were ordinary geese that had withstood the magic power of the dragon's bloodline and evolved. They grew to the size of a pony, and their combat power was comparable to that of a low-level World of Warcraft. Long-necked goose was full of nutrition, especially its goose eggs, which were large and plentiful. After being marinated, they were delicious. Hairy sheep were ordinary goats that had not yet expanded their population. However, their wool was very dense and grew a lot, which made the wool cloth very comfortable. Treehorn deer were ordinary reindeer that had evolved. Their antlers were like trees, which were very nutritious. Big-eared elephant were ordinary elephants that had just evolved. Their population had not yet expanded, and they only found that their strength had increased. Grass mud horse were ordinary alpacas that had just evolved. Their population had not yet expanded. Alpacas were livestock that used both meat and fur. Grass mud horses should be able to use their fur and meat to a higher value. Bard alone had brought a large number of dragon meat beasts to List, and there would definitely be more in the future. Unfortunately, the other dragons had not yet figured out how to achieve climax and release the magic power of the dragon's bloodline. Some dragons might not even achieve climax once in their lives. Your Majesty, please rest assured. Chris will complete the cultivation of the bloodline fruit as soon as possible. Chris Truth, the first Arcana Minister and the Dean of the Royal Magic Academy, nodded and replied. List no longer asked about this aspect of the content. Instead, he asked Achi, "What's your next research topic? Brother, didn't you say that you have a new dragon to tame?" So, Achi plans to study the emerald dragon's hind legs and try to figure out the cultivation method of the mind fruit tree, so that I can hoard more mind fruit trees for brother. Well, then I'll wait for your good news. Leaving the Mage Tower, List went to the Dragon Pit mine again, ready to seize the time to train with Ornn and strive to conquer the personal 9th dragon. However, when he rode the invisible dragon bard to the Dragon Pit mine, he suddenly felt a mysterious wave. It's the feedback of the power of fate. He raised his eyebrows and had already captured the source of the wave. It seems that there is a big elf around waiting for me to pick. Just like the reminder of every smoke mission, he could now clearly grasp what the power of fate was guiding. At this moment, it was a big elf. 9 Heaven's Divine Emperor. Chapter 1084. Following his feeling, List rode on the gray iron dragon Ornn and headed towards the source of the threads of fate. This feeling was extremely mysterious but exceptionally clear. After receiving the blessing of fate, this is the first time I have such a strong feeling towards the threads of fate. It seems that it's because the object of the feeling is a great elf that it's so clear. On the contrary, the threads of fate around me, no matter if it's something small or related to dragons, are not as strong. He was calculating. The threads of fate related to dragons were not strong enough because there were too many accidents that could happen. Although the threads of fate of other small things would not have too many accidents because he did not pay much attention to them, the power of the threads was not strong enough. No matter what, the power of fate definitely had to be explored step by step. He did not know how long it would take for the smoke dragon to be born. During this period of time, he could only control the power of fate by himself. Unknowingly, he and Ornn had already flown from the Dragon Pit territory to the neighboring Amazon territory. The Amazon territory was located west of the Dragon Pit territory and north of the King's territory. It was adjacent to the saltwater sea, the fief of the mermaid Duke Blueboxy. This place had a typical tropical rainforest climate, with dense vegetation and crisscrossing rivers. However, because of this, the development difficulty was extremely high. Only the location of the territory and the main city had been planned. Orders of chivalry had incorporated the Moonkiller tribes here a few times. However, there should still be many Moonkiller tribes hiding here, playing hide-and-seek with orders of chivalry. Relying on the tall trees as a cover, it was difficult to wipe out the Moonkiller tribes. There were even many night tribes that died here. To completely incorporate them, they would have to burn down the entire forest. However, the humidity in this forest was very high, and it was not easy to ignite a large area of fire. At this moment, Liszt was hovering in the sky above the area that he named the Amazon rainforest. The threads of fate were indeed strong, but he could not pinpoint the exact location of the great elf. He had to find it himself. At the same time, he was using this opportunity to find the great elf to explore the use of the power of fate. Every action would trigger the threads of fate to a different extent. When he chose the appropriate action and triggered the threads of fate, he would be able to achieve his desired goal. It's a pity that Orn and I are unable to cooperate with the magic eye. Only the fire dragon, water dragon, and formless dragon can operate the magic eye to form a special and powerful vision. After he and Aon became one, Aon's vision was just a simple dragon's vision, and his vision was just clearer. Unable to observe the light of mana retroaction, he had to personally use the magic eyes with his naked eyes to observe. Fortunately, he now had supreme demonic dragon chi, and the effect of the magic eye was greatly enhanced. He could barely see the magic of the entire Amazon rainforest. There's too much light from the mana retroaction, but it's blocked by the trees so I can't see it clearly. I can basically tell that most of it is the light of World of Warcraft. Also, my observation of the rainforest isn't pulling on the threads of fate, and it's going against the Grand Elf's fate. Therefore, he adjusted his plan and no longer focused on observing the rainforest. Instead, he focused on looking down from the sky. Following that, he made a few more adjustments, but he didn't sense any fate approaching that of a Grand Elf, until he turned his gaze to the densely packed rivers and lakes in the Amazon rainforest. At this moment, he clearly felt that he was getting closer to the fate of that Grand Elf, or it could be said that the threads of fate that were connected to that Grand Elf were being pulled more violently. So, this is an aquatic Grand Elf? His gaze fell on a lake below. This lake was huge and connected to the main river in the rainforest. On the surface of the lake, a small part was covered by green plants, especially the huge round leaves, which were densely packed together. Aon, let's go to the lake. One man and one dragon landed by the lake. Liszt approached the huge round leaves on the surface of the lake and carefully observed this plant. In his senses, the threads of fate were connected to this plant. Such a huge leaf, one piece is about the size of a house, like a lotus, but soon he shook his head. No, it's not like a lotus, it should be like a water lily. Only the leaves of a water lily float on the surface of the water. Liszt had seen lotus flowers and water lilies in parks on Earth before. These two plants were very similar and many people easily confused them. But the leaves of a water lily floated on the surface of the water, while the leaves of a lotus grew out of the surface of the water and did not stick to the surface of the water. Actually, it's not like a water lily. The leaves of this plant are not only big but also not flat. The edges are curled up just like a bathtub. One plant has about 17 or 18 leaves, and the leaves at the edge have completely spread out. The leaf in the middle is like a triangle and it's not big. A mature leaf was the size of a house, and all the leaves of the entire plant added together was equivalent to a giant. It was a gigantic water lily, yet it was so domineering. Liszt immediately named this new plant Monarch Lotus. Let's call it Monarch Lotus. The Grand Elf I'm looking for is likely a Monarch Lotus Grand Elf. Unfortunately, the Monarch Lotus does not have the light of mana retroaction. It's not a magic potion and it doesn't seem to have any economic value. He lightly jumped onto a leaf of the Monarch Lotus and stood steadily on it, but there were faint signs of the leaf being trampled. This kind of leaf could not be used as a boat to glide. Among the 17 or 18 leaves, a flower and a few flower buds emerged from the surface of the water. Beside the flower bud there was a black thing which was probably the fruit. Liszt directly walked over and plucked the fruit, which was about the size of a person's arms. Then he jumped onto the shore. Orn turned his head to take a look, and then he was indifferent. Liszt peeled the fruit, and the sturdy outer skin easily broke under his powerful strength. Then he revealed the corn-like grains inside. There were about a few hundred of them. Of course they only looked like corn, but in fact each grain was the size of a child's fist. His body was already immune to all poisons, and his battle energy was enough to dissolve everything. He directly peeled off a corn grain, and took a light bite. Immediately his eyes lit up. The taste is very fragrant, just like eating a pineapple. The fragrance lingers in the mouth and the juice is plentiful. The seeds of the monarch lotus can be eaten as a fruit, and it's a very delicious fruit. This was good news. However, such a large monarch lotus only produced a few seeds, and its value was not high enough. No matter what, I have to find Great Elf Wang Lian first. He kept the seed into the space ring and mounted the gray-mouthed iron dragon Aon. Following the rivers and lakes, he started to search for new monarch lotuses. Finally, on a wide river, he saw the light of mana retroaction that he wanted to see. It was a giant king lotus floating on the water. The leaves were huge and there were many of them. A single monarch lotus occupied half of the river, emitting chaotic colors of mana retroaction. On one of the leaves of the monarch lotus, there was a small elf lying on it, happily basking in the sun and sleeping soundly. Orn, who was connected to List's mind as one, let out a mischievous roar and rapidly released his fierce dragon aura. The overwhelming dragon's might and the deafening roar scared the sleeping Wang Lian out of her wits, causing her to fall into the river through the gaps between the leaves. 9 Heaven's Divine Emperors. Chapter 1085. Wang Lian, who had fallen into the river, was unable to run away. List, who had the mermaid's heart contract, could easily catch her in the water as if he was walking on flat ground. He then jumped back onto a leaf of the monarch lotus worm grass. He carefully examined Wang Lian in his hand. Although this great elf lived on the surface of water, it was not a water elf. Or rather, although monarch lotus grew in lakes and rivers, it was not a marine plant. Therefore Wang Lian was still a terrestrial elf. It had no gills and had a pair of transparent wings on its back. On its head were 2 small monarch lotus leaves that hung on either side of its head. It was as if it had split its hair into 2 halves. It was cute and slightly comical. Its body was a crystalline pale white. This was the body color of most elves, nothing too special. It had large black eyes and exquisite facial features. It was very beautiful. But at this moment Wang Lian's expression was fierce. It shouted angrily, "Ah chi!" It was unknown what it meant. "Stop shouting, little fellow. You and I are fated." List stroked the leaf on Wang Lian's head. He was not in a hurry to form a contract. He was feeling the power of fate. As a person favored by fate who had fused with the smoke dragon, he had been constantly adapting and trying to control the power of fate. But the power of fate was an illusory existence. It could not be touched or seen and could only be vaguely felt. It was very difficult to master it. After all, he was not the real smoke dragon. The smoke dragon had only been born in his mind. I started feeling Wang Lian's threads of fate near the dragon pit mine. Then I searched all the way here. This process is considered to be stirring the threads of fate, or rather, controlling fate. After I captured Great Elf Wang Lian, this thread of fate came to an abrupt end. Suddenly stopping did not mean that the thread had broken, but that the thread had disappeared. Or rather, the power of fate that connected Wang Lian to List had suddenly disappeared. What a strange phenomenon. I still can't understand it. List felt for a long time but still could not figure out the power of fate. Wang Lian, who was in his hand, had been shouting, "Ah chi" for 15 minutes. Her voice was hoarse. Seeing that shouting didn't work, she hung lazily in List's hand, squinting her eyes as if she was basking in the sun. Since she couldn't resist, she might as well enjoy it. What a cute big elf. Come on, bite me. List snapped out of his reverie. He tightened the skin on his index finger and stuffed it into Wang Lian's mouth. Without waiting for Wang Lian to react, he tapped the tip of his index finger against her teeth. Immediately, her skin ruptured and a drop of blood was squeezed out, mixing with Wang Lian's teeth. A miraculous connection was instantly established, and he and Wang Lian could already communicate on the spiritual level. He could feel that Wang Lian's heart was very calm. She simply wanted to bask in the sun and sleep. Perhaps everything would return to how it was before after a nap. There was no giant lizard with a thunderous voice, and there was no detestable bastard grabbing his neck. The sudden spiritual contract with List interrupted Wang Lian's pure heart, causing her to open her eyes in confusion. "Ah chi. What name do you think I should give you?" List and Wang Lian looked at each other, thinking seriously. "You are an elf that lives in the river. Actually, the name King of the River Tam suits you the best, but I gave the name Tam to a giant kelp elf. The giant kelp elf was Parker, and the giant kelp elves were Fitz, Tam, and Eddie. Since he had given the name to the giant kelp elf, List definitely couldn't take it back. But he quickly had a flash of inspiration. I remember that the full name of the King of the River is Tam Kench. Since Tam has already been given to the giant kelp elf, I'll give Kench to you. And so, while Wang Lian was in a daze and couldn't understand the situation in front of her, she already had a new name, Kench. Kench became List's 30th great elf, and was also one of the few great elves that List had named himself. He didn't bother to name the great elves that came from the Grey Iron family and the Earth Tyrant family, and just used their previous names. There were only 12 great elves that List had named himself. Kelp Grand Elf Parker, Pea Grand Elf Ash, Thorn Grand Elf Ella, Mangrove Grand Elf Nami, Potato Grand Elf Kutch, Banana Grand Elf Bobby, Corn Grand Elf Tick, Corn Grand Elf Mickey, Giant Konjac Grand Elf Carl, Calabash Grand Elf Cree, Coffee Grand Elf Mundo, and Wang Lotus Grand Elf Kenji. Of the remaining 18, 7 came from the Grey Iron family: oats, barley, apple, tomato, pea, white crystal chrysanthemum, and ice grass elf. 11 came from the Earth Tyrant family: stonewood, tobacco, black tea, barley, corn, iris, glutinous rice, ginger, beet, and 2 wheat elves. Kench snapped out of his daze and asked. He felt enmity towards List, but he also felt close to him. He was very conflicted. Remember, Kench, you are my great elf from now on. List wasn't in a hurry to explain. Instead, he carried Kench and leaped onto the back of the Grey Iron Dragon Orn. Now let's go inspect the area where the Wang Lian grows, and see if there are any potion species. Wang Lian was a plant unique to the Amazon rainforest. As long as he searched along the river and lake, he would be able to find traces of Wang Lian. But after half an hour he had already scanned a large area, but he still didn't find any Wang Lian with mana retroaction, nor did he find any new worm stalks or elves. Seems like there really aren't any. There's a mana retroaction glow on the lake's surface. List was instantly delighted, and he urged Orn to dive down. When he landed on the lake surface, he could clearly see that there was a small patch of Wang Lian with light blue magical light floating on the lake surface. Among them, there was even a Wang Lian with chaotic magical light. Great! There's a monarch lotus cordyceps, and there are quite a few monarch lotuses growing around it. Soon he found the Wang Lian sprite worm hiding under a leaf. It was a chubby light green sprite worm. Ordinary sprite worms could no longer enter List's eyes, but this sprite worm with its own potion made List very excited. The reason was none other than the fact that with the Wang Lian, Kench's value would immediately soar. Achi? Kench felt List's excitement and became more and more puzzled. Kench, it's time for you to show off your skills. In the future, plant the Wang Lian in the area under the influence of your worm stalks. The Wang Lian has a high requirement for the environment, so I'm afraid it can only be planted here. It will be difficult for my serfs to farm here for the time being. But it doesn't matter, I still have ugly fish. He quickly contacted the saltwater sea Duke Brabosi and had Brabosi command ugly fish to stay in the Amazon territory and be responsible for planting the Wang Lian. At the same time, he dug out a Wang Lian and sent it to the wizard tower, handing it over to the potion arcanist to refine into a potion and analyze its value. Kench, who had been brought around by List all along the way, was in a daze. Ah, chi. Chapter 1086. The monarch lotus was a gigantic plant with water attribute magic power. The concentration of magic power was not low, and one should be able to refine more than 10 potions. For an arcanist who specialized in refining potions, this task could be completed in half a day. List tried the completed potion himself. Although he was a fire attribute warrior, it did not hinder him from judging the quality of other potions. However, after drinking it, the impact of the potion was very weak. He then frowned. This is not right. The impact of magic power is not as strong as that of a normal potion. Potions were defined by the Royal Arcana Academy, Guild of Magic, into 6 levels. Normal potion, special potion, strong potion, auxiliary potion, and dragon potion. The normal potion was the most common chaos attribute potion. The monarch lotus should at least be a normal potion. He did not expect it to be so low. Dean Chris also tried a monarch lotus potion. Whenever List came to the Royal Arcana Academy, Chris would be the one to receive him. Your Majesty, the monarch lotus potion is too weak. Of all the normal potions I've seen, this is probably the worst. Test it a few more times to see if it has any potential as an auxiliary potion. Yes. Chris then arranged for a special knight to come and help with the test. Unfortunately, the Monarch Lotus Potion did not have any properties as an auxiliary potion. Now there is only one possibility left. Whether the Monarch Lotus Potion has potential as a dragon potion, we can only leave it to you, Your Majesty, to test it yourself. Okay. List nodded. He took 2 Monarch Lotus Potions and directly summoned the invisible dragon Bard. Yeah. Come Bard, let's go to the Mermaid City. When they arrived at the Mermaid City, List summoned the little water dragon Water and threw a Monarch Lotus Potion to him. Try it and see if it has any effect on you. Yo-ho! Water directly crushed the potion bottle with his throat and swallowed the Monarch Lotus Potion. As soon as magic power spread, he suddenly widened his dragon eyes and let out a joyful cheer. He sent a message to List using the Dragon Heart code. This thing is strong. List, I want more. List, who did not have much hope, was very surprised. He casually tossed the second King Lotus Potion to Walter, then turned around and rode on Walter's Dragon Tooth platform. With the heart and soul connection, he instantly understood the magic enhancement effect of the King Lotus Potion on the water dragon. It can't compare to the enhancement effect of the fire dragon Water on the fire dragon, but the difference isn't too big. It can be called a dragon potion. This was truly a pleasant surprise. He had only hoped that the Monarch Lotus Potion could become a high-quality single common potion to make up for the Fire Kingdom's huge demand for potions. He never expected the Monarch Lotus Potion to become a dragon potion in one go. However, after all, he had been through too many big scenes. After a brief moment of surprise, he calmed down. The potion extracted from the Phoenix Parasol tree is very helpful to fire dragons, but the effect on other dragons is average. It's named Fire Dragon Potion. The potion extracted from the Monarch Lotus is very helpful to water dragons. I wonder if it's helpful to other dragons? If it was helpful, it could be called Blue Dragon Water, or something like that. If it wasn't helpful, it could only be called Water Dragon Water. Yo-ho! Walter was still clamoring to take the potion. Don't be impatient. This is a newly discovered potion extracted from the Monarch Lotus. The Monarch Lotus hasn't been planted on a large scale yet. If you want it, you'll have to wait for at least half a year. He had already instructed Wuxia to order the clowns to plant the Monarch Lotus. However, even with the influence of the Great Sprite's worm stalk, the Monarch Lotus still needed time to grow. Yo-ho! Walter expressed his understanding, but requested that once the Monarch Lotus matured, all of it would be given to him. He would not allow anyone else or dragons to touch it. Don't worry. List replied casually and sent the little water dragon away. He then quickly rode the invisible dragon Bard to the Amazon rainforest. Only 2 days had passed, but clowns had already arrived in the Amazon rainforest one after another. Wuxia had also personally followed the river and rushed to the Amazon territory to plan the Monarch Lotus plantation. The Monarch Lotus had to live in freshwater. Therefore, in order to plant as much as possible, he needed to plan a wide, crisscrossing body of water in the Amazon rainforest. It was tentatively set at a scale of 10,000 acres. The area of influence of the Great Sprite's worm stalk was usually between 4,800 acres to 7,200 acres. The area beyond that was reserved for cultivating new Monarch Lotus fairies. Riding on the back of the invisible dragon, one could see densely packed clowns combing the river and digging the lake. These were clowns with high intelligence. As the source of vitality potion improved their fertility, their population increased exponentially. Adult clowns could be seen everywhere with little clowns on their backs. The clowns did not live in a family unit, but their mothers would take care of them until they could live independently. Your Majesty, are you here to supervise the construction? This is only a small project of 10,000 acres of magic medicine field. Wuxia stood in the river. The water level only reached her waist. Every mermaid was very beautiful, but their bodies were too huge. They could only be seen from afar and not played with. List jumped onto Wuxia's shoulder. He pointed at the busy clowns and smiled. This is not just 10,000 acres of magic medicine field. The potions refined from the Monarch Lotus have already been confirmed to have the value of dragon medicine. These 10,000 acres of Monarch Lotus will produce an endless supply of dragon medicine to feed my dragons. Of course, I still have to dig up a Monarch Lotus to test if it is effective on other dragons. Wuxia sighed in admiration. Your brilliance makes me unable to look straight at you. The value of dragon medicine is enormous. The 3 human kingdoms only have one kind of red dragon water, and you already have a second. My luck has always been good. Yes. Right, how is the research on the mermaid's source of vitality in the Royal Arcane Academy? List asked. After solving the problem of the clown's reproduction, the Arcanist had been researching the problem of the mermaid's reproduction. However, the mermaids reproduced asexually, so it was more complicated to solve. Wuxia sighed. I have already donated all my earnings to the Source of Vitality Laboratory, but there has been no good news so far. Don't worry, you still have a long life. 10 years is not enough for 20 years, and 20 years is not enough for 100 years. I believe that one day the mermaids will regain their fertility. Your Majesty's glory, I hope that such a day will come. There will be. You continue to command. I am very busy, so I will go back first. He said a few words, then hurriedly plucked a monarch lotus and left the Amazon rainforest. The monarch lotus magic potion was only an interlude for this period of time. The most important thing was to train with the gray-mouthed iron dragon Aon and quickly stir the threads of fate of the unknown new dragon. A new monarch lotus magic potion was quickly refined into a magic potion, so he directly stuffed 2 magic potions into Bard and Aon's hands. Bard finished the potion and had no experience at all. Aon finished the potion and also had no experience at all. Unfortunately, this magic potion is only effective on water dragons. Sigh, it is only water dragon water, not blue dragon water. List shook his head. Actually, he was not very disappointed. In fact, just the water dragon water was enough to make him overjoyed. This was an unexpected surprise. The monarch lotus plantation was in full swing, and the water dragon water was listed as a special dragon medicine for the little water dragon. After finishing this interlude, List carefully sensed the threads of fate around him. There were no threads worth making a move on, so he calmed down and continued to crazily train with Aon. Time flew by. It was already the end of April. The figure of the knight in Aon's spiritual world became clearer and clearer, and he was not far from successfully branding his spiritual imprint. At this moment, List's heart suddenly moved, and a mysterious feeling attacked him. That was the power of fate. At the same time, a thread of fate that was originally dim was stirred violently, and he could not ignore it. He focused a little. Then he sensed the source of this thread of fate. Aetnia, Marquis of Great West, is back? Chapter 1087. Aetnia, the Marquis of Great West, was the oldest of the mermaids. Before the mermaids finished their sea voyage, she had brought the sea sprites back to the Fire Kingdom in advance. Your Majesty, I'm sorry for the delay. I've delayed your plans for the development of the sea in the Fire Kingdom. After seeing List in the Mermaid City, she immediately expressed her apologies. Obviously, she knew that List was not satisfied with the mermaid's absence for such a long time. One would not slap a smiling person. Moreover, mermaids were not knights. List did not choose to criticize the mermaids for strictly following the knight system and becoming loyal followers, so he nodded and said, "It's been a hard journey, Marquis Aetnia. How are the other mermaids?" "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. They are living well in the sea. There are countless treasures in the sea that attract them. But they will soon finish mapping the coastline of the legendary continent, and then return to the Fire Kingdom to help Your Majesty develop the sea. We have never forgotten to purify the Devil's Sea. The purification of the Devil's Sea must be carried out. When the time is right, I will personally preside over it." List was also curious about the Malfa continent on the other side of the Devil's Sea. But rice must be eaten one bite at a time. He asked, "What about the sea sprites you brought back?" "They are all here." Following Aetnia's call, a large number of sprites came. Most of them were sprite worms. There were a dozen lesser sprites and 2 greater sprites. These sprites had already been contracted with Aetnia. List did not intend to contract aquatic sprites. It was more convenient to let the mermaids contract them. "What kind of sprites are they?" "This is a kelp sprite. I named it Shakalaka. This is a sea pine sprite. I named it Aristotle. This lesser sprite is..." Aetnia introduced the aquatic sprites one by one. The kelp sprite and the sea pine sprite had names, but the others did not. Judging from the tone of her introduction, she had no liking for sprites and treated them as tools. After all, a long time ago the Sea Kingdom would capture sprite worms and trade them with humans. In their view, sprites were like fishes and shrimps. Of course, during the era when mermaids ruled the Sea Kingdom, the elves only had sprite worms. Lesser sprites, greater sprites, and dragon sprites had yet to be born. Stupid sprite worms were indeed no different from fishes and shrimps. Well, you have to take good care of these sprites, especially the kelp great sprite. It can grow kelp, a valuable seafood. It just so happened that Bruno Bossi had been very busy recently. She had to develop the saltwater sea while helping me manage the Amazon rainforest. If you come back, you can take over the Amazon rainforest. As you wish. Etnia was easy to talk to. When you've accumulated enough battle merits, I'll confer you the title of Duke of Great Western and divide a sea as your fief, List said. Thank you for your generosity, Your Majesty. I will manage the Amazon rainforest well. After the official business was done, List began to ask Etnia about her special experiences during the cruise. Although they had the connection of the Devil Foundation, there were many things that couldn't be explained in detail through the Devil Foundation. The sea is far lonelier than the sea of the Moon Empire era. Your Majesty, the era I lived in was probably at the end of the Moon Empire era, even many years after the Moon Empire disappeared. At that time, the pollution of the cursed dragon had already shrouded the sea, but it was still more lively than the sea now. Etnia continued with emotion. In our era, the sea not only had a large number of intelligent marine races such as mermaids, nagas, clowns, sirens and so on. There were also countless sea monsters, and even the sea giant Leviathan was not rare. However, during this voyage all I saw was desolation. Without the intelligent marine races, mermaids, nagas and clowns had completely disappeared. Even the remains of the palaces of the former sea kingdom were not found. Sea monsters that roamed the sea were also rare. The only magical creature found was the flood dragon, the Hydra. We organized several collective hunts, but the Hydra escaped. The location of the Hydra is probably in this sea. She pointed to a map of the legendary continent that was gradually outlined, her fingertips pointing to the sea north of the continent. This sea was located in the coastal area of the noble Frost Empire. When I have time, I will take action with a chi and capture this Hydra. It is reasonable to say that the flood dragon has extraordinary intelligence. Maybe it can tame the Hydra as a guardian beast, just like taming the giant lion Nimia. List was very envious of this Hydra. He was envious of all magical things. Your Majesty, I also met a siren in the sea of the unsetting light empire. She used to live on land. According to her conversation, the language of the unsetting light empire was a high-level clear text, similar to the grammatical structure of the moon language. It was far closer to the moon language than the wind language and the snake language. No matter how close it is not the moon language. The only one that inherited the civilization of the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire is the Fire Kingdom. List chuckled. What else did you communicate with that siren? I asked her if she was willing to come to the Fire Kingdom. She said she was not willing. Although sirens were rare in the sea, a chi was not the only one. In the past, List had seen the old siren Izzy. However, Izzy's magic talent was poor. In the historical records, there were no records of sirens having magic talent. From this point of view, a chi was unique. However, sirens were really beautiful. Did you talk about the situation of the unsetting light empire with the siren? Sorry, I am not interested in the unsetting light empire, so I did not talk about it. And after all, there is a gap in our language, so I stumbled and did not have a pleasant conversation. Compared to His Excellency Achilles, that siren is too ignorant and too childish. The return of Etnia was undoubtedly a great help to the marine industry. The number of clowns was increasing, and it was impossible to rely on a mermaid like Blue Bushy to completely control them. So List continued to crazily train with the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn. Just like that, time flew into the future without stopping. At the same time, the Royal Arcane Academy on Flame Island and the various laboratories affiliated to the academy were constantly launching magical technology products. Most of them were inventions related to the people's livelihood. The Arcanist system had steadily moved towards the scholar route that List had conceived. Mages no longer prioritized learning powerful magic. After the name change, the primary goal of the Arcanist was to concentrate on researching all kinds of magical technology and inventions. In this context, the Royal Shipyard in the Whirlpool Estuary City, as well as the ship laboratory jointly invested by the Royal Shipyard and the Royal Arcane Academy. The chief arcanist of the laboratory, Inuit Truth, announced that the era of sailing ships was about to become a thing of the past. The magic ship was officially born. Chapter 1088. When List first came to this world, the Sapphire Duchy was at the forefront of navigation technology, reaching the era of horizontal sailing. Later, List introduced vertical sails, and hybrid sailboats became the main force of the Fire Kingdom. The entire Fire Archipelago used hybrid sailboats for navigation trade, as well as for every war. Even fishing boats used a combination of horizontal sails and vertical sails. However, hybrid sailboats, no matter how advanced, could not jump out of the limitations of sailboats and must be driven by wind. Therefore, he had been asking the arcanists of the Royal Arcane Academy to research a steam engine that could be driven by boiling water. However, the steam engine involved the structure of many mechanical parts, which could not be completed overnight. Moreover, the arcanists here were not sensitive to pure mechanical creations. Therefore, the steam engine was difficult to produce. Even if a few models were made, they looked like toys. Even if Liszt told the arcanists that the power of boiling water was infinite, the arcanists would not understand. No matter how powerful the power of boiling water was, could it be as powerful as the power of magic? Could it be as powerful as the power of dragons? Inuit Truth, the arcanist who was once named by the Smoke Mission, was the first to develop a new generation of hybrid sailboats by combining horizontal sails and vertical sails. His attitude towards the steam engine was no different from that of the general arcanists, and he also trusted magic more. Therefore, he did not develop steam ships, but based on the ideas suggested by Liszt, he studied another kind of ship, the magic ship. Before him, there was Gundolf Truth, who invented the magic bicycle and appeared on the cover of Great Arcanist. Inspired, Inuit began to combine magic with ships. In the continuous experiments in the ship laboratory, he finally combined the magic array with the propeller, and completed the research and development of the first magic ship. It is worth mentioning that the structure of the propeller was taught by Liszt. All my research results were realized under the unparalleled and wise guidance of His Majesty the King. It was His Majesty the King who commissioned me to design ships and told me that ships should get rid of oars and sails, and use propellers to propel them, that I was able to design the magic ship. When Inuit was interviewed on the cover of Great Arcanist, he spent a whole page complimenting His Majesty Liszt for his help in the research and development of the magic ship. He even named the thruster Flame Thruster, to curry favor. The so-called propeller was just an ordinary propeller that was powered by a magic array. The propeller was used to propel the flow of water. And so the magic ship was born. The standard speed of the magic ship can reach 70 knots, which is several times faster than the current fastest Iron Dragon warship, which is 20 knots. In theory, magic ships can increase the speed of their propellers infinitely. 70 knots is just a speed that saves on magic power consumption. If you don't care about magic power consumption and the hull is sturdy enough, you can reach 700 knots. Inuit boasted about the magic ship in high spirits. In the era of hover sail, the fastest palace sailing ship in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire could only sail at 10 knots, a little over 18 kilometers per hour. In the era of hybrid-powered sailboats, the fastest Iron Dragon warship in the Fire Kingdom could reach a speed of 20 knots, which was a little more than 37 kilometers per hour. Now that the magic ship had reached a speed of 70 knots, it could travel at a speed of 130 kilometers per hour. Moreover, this speed would not be affected by the wind. Even if the wind was strong and against the wind, it would still be able to reach more than 100 kilometers per hour. In the summary of the interview of Great Arcanist, Inuit and his invention of the magic ship were described as follows. With the invention of the magic ship by the chief arcanist Inuit Truth, the prelude of the age of great navigation has slowly begun. It is conceivable that in the future humans will sail the magic ship on the sea as freely as a knight riding a horse on the continent. There was a suspicion of excessive boasting. In fact, with the opening of the magic transmission circle, the age of great navigation had become less important. The communication between the Fire Kingdom and the legendary continent basically did not need to be completed by sea. However, the invention of the magic ship was still very important. It meant that the development of the sea had rapidly risen to a new level. For this reason, Liszt personally returned from the Dragon Pit mine and received Inuit and his ship laboratory arcanist team in the Palace of Stars, Sun, Moon, and Stars. He talked to Inuit in a very friendly manner. Inuit, the magic ship has been freed from the limitation of sails. Maybe it can be made bigger. A ship can carry 1 orders of chivalry or even a dragon. Your next research direction can be in this direction. I need to transport the knight and the dragon by sea. As you wish, Your Majesty, I will seriously think about how to strengthen the magic ship. Very good. Liszt was very happy. Of course, he did not really need to use the magic ship to transport the knight to conquer the legendary continent. It was not efficient enough. Building a magic transmission circle to conquer the legendary continent quickly was the way to go. However, he thought of another continent, the Malfa continent. It was difficult to find a natural node that led directly to the Malfa continent through the magic transmission circle. Therefore, if he wanted to explore the Malfa continent, he still had to cross the Devil's Sea. If it was him, he could just follow a chi and the mermaids and swim together. However, not only did he want to go by himself, but he also wanted to lead an army there. He had to build some dragon carrier that could transport the dragon. After all, he did not know the situation of the Malfa continent. If he wanted to go there, he would have to send an army. Only a strong dragon could cross the river. The magic ship caused a lot of excitement in the Fire Kingdom, but it was only a few days of enthusiasm. The magic transmission circle between Jade City and Realgar City had already made the Fire Kingdom a kingdom on land. The age of great navigation was not among the goals of many nobles. For the nobles of the kingdom, the way to explore the sea was to plunder the legendary continent. After the enthusiasm subsided, they quickly forgot about the magic ship. Regarding this, Liszt could only say, how could a sparrow and a swallow know the ambition of a great swan? Of course, he did not need the short-sighted nobles to understand his great goal. He had already returned to the Dragon Pit mine and continued to train with the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn. However, very quickly, a flickering thread of fate attracted him. Following the thread, he felt the source of the thread of fate, the great P-elf Aishi. After carefully analyzing it, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and could not help but laugh out loud. Haha, great news, Aishi actually evolved successfully. After subduing the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn 2 years ago, Aishi quickly fell in love with this dragon. It took a long time for a great elf to evolve into a dragon elf. Some great elves could even like a dragon for more than 10 years. Not every great elf could evolve successfully in such a short time like the Phoenix Tree Great Elf. Therefore Aishi only completed her evolution after waiting for more than 2 years. He hurriedly returned to the Palace of Stars and Sunday. As soon as he entered the palace that belonged to Aishi, he saw a beautiful, tall and straight dragon elf. She was naked and holding a piece of rope in her hand. After seeing Liszt, Aishi, who had just grown into a pea-dragon elf, revealed a sweet smile. Liszt, I evolved and I feel that my rope skills have also improved. Do you want to appreciate it? 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1089. Of course, there was no need to appreciate rope art. However, Liszt circled around the pea sprite, or to be precise, the pea-dragon sprite Aishi. Very excellent, Aishi. You did not disappoint me. Now you have become the 4th dragon sprite of the Flame family. The pea plantation can be fully cultivated. I thought you would like rope art very much. Aishi did not answer the question. Ahem, I am indeed interested in the art of rope art, but I don't have the time. I will arrange for the servants in the palace to cooperate with you and let you carefully display your artistic talent. Aishi shook her head and said disappointedly, unfortunately, many of those servants are too vulgar and don't understand what my rope art is trying to express. Liszt, I thought you would understand. Only rope art can fully display the curves of beautiful things. You can slowly search among the servants. I believe there will be people who can understand your pursuit of the perfect curve. And you can also spread it among the elves. Perhaps the elves will understand. They won't understand. The pea sprites are just a bunch of fools. Even if they are born as pea sprites, they won't understand. Aishi said very seriously, most elves are fools. Carly, Yadi, and Ainfant are fools as well. And this trait of foolishness is most obvious in Ella. Carly was a man-eating tree dragon elf, Yadi was a buckwheat dragon elf, and Ainfant was a phoenix parasol tree dragon elf. Obviously Aishi looked down on these 3 dragon elves. As for Ella, most of the elves seemed to look down on Ella. Fortunately, Ella was still pursuing dragons and trying to evolve. After announcing the failure of the aluminum dragon Connor, she began to struggle with the mountain dragon Marta, looking for each other's shining points, hoping to make herself fall in love with the mountain dragon Marta. This allowed the sun, moon, and stars palace to enjoy a period of peace. As long as you understand in your heart, some things don't need to be said. I understand. Aishi sighed. Unfortunately, I can understand you, but very few of you can understand me. Rope art is such a noble art. Liszt, as a king, a top existence among the nobles, you really should learn rope art to dress yourself. After evolving into a dragon elf, Aishi's IQ and eloquence had obviously improved greatly, but her aesthetic sense was still as strange as ever. Liszt decisively ended the conversation. Now that you are a dragon elf, do you need me to prepare a few sets of clothes for you to change into? Aishi lowered her head and thought for a moment before replying, performing the rope technique naked is the essence of art. However, I still have to face the eyes of the secular world. In that case, customize a few sets of clothes for me. No problem. After leaving Ike's palace, List couldn't help but wipe the sweat off his forehead. Most of the elves under his command had different personalities. Apart from Ella, the most unique one was probably Ike, who was addicted to the art of rope. Ike was once the spirit of the Marquis of P Island, D. Maria Yuhuashur. D. Maria must be a pervert in private. Ike's interest in rope skills must have been learned from this guy. I have to say, under the sanctimonious appearance of the aristocrats, there is a perverted side. Your Majesty, will you be staying in the palace for dinner tonight? Asked the head butler of the internal court, Carter. List shook his head. Mr. Carter, there is no need to prepare dinner for me. I will leave the palace in a while. The threads of fate related to the new dragon were becoming clearer and clearer. He needed to work harder and not rest. If he did, he might miss this rare opportunity. For him, the Fire Kingdom was a small matter. The dragon was a big deal. Carter hesitated. Seeing this, List said, Mr. Carter, what is the matter? It's like this, Your Majesty. You rarely stay in the Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace. Her Highness Emily has gone back to the palace to have a meal a few times, but she always seemed unhappy. Her Highness must really want to have a meal with you, Your Majesty. Carter was old and wise, so he naturally understood some of the twists and turns. Oh, I will find time to invite Emily to eat together, List replied honestly. He did not need to hide his feelings for Emily. This was the dragon knight that he had carefully cared for and raised from a young age. Emily, who was 16 years old this year, was already an adult. From a dry little girl in the past, she had grown into a powerful woman with beautiful curves. She was as dazzling as a budding flower. Riding on the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn and leaving the palace, he was still sighing in his heart. Emily has grown up. It is time for me to fulfill my promise. May had just arrived. The knight figure in the spiritual world of the gray-mouthed iron dragon Orn stopped when it was about to reach completion. Very soon List understood why. Orn, you have a knot in your heart. Orn replied honestly. He did have a knot in his heart. In the past, he was the dragon of the Grey Iron Duchy and was like-minded with the first Grey Iron Grand Duke. The spiritual imprint of the first Grey Iron Grand Duke had already been erased, but that memory was still preserved in his heart. It was this memory that became the stumbling block that prevented List from completing the spiritual imprint. He thought for a while and decided, why don't we travel to the ruins of the Grey Iron Duchy and reminisce about your memories of the first Grey Iron Grand Duke? Relax, maybe the knot in your heart will be solved soon. Orn nodded in agreement. Hence, a human and a dragon flew up into the sky and went straight to the Jade Rock Mountain Magic Gate. They passed through the majestic Jade Teleportation Formation and arrived at the majestic Yellow Plains. This was the fief of Yevich Water Peanut. However, Yevich was still farming in the Snowstorm Mountain Duchy. The person in charge of majestic Yellow City was his wife's brother. List didn't know Yevich's wife's brother. He wasn't interested in getting to know him. After passing through the magic gate, he flew away without saying a word. He flew all the way to the northwest, passing through the dense primeval forest. When he was tired, he would land on the top of a mountain to rest. With the magic platform to communicate with the outside world, he could still manage the Fire Kingdom even if he went far away. There was no need for him to stay in the palace all the time. This primeval forest is in urgent need of development. The Eagle Kingdom has no plans to develop it, so it should be taken over by the Fire Kingdom. It's a pity that the population is a big problem. There aren't even enough people to develop Flame Island, let alone this place. After I swallow up the Eagle Kingdom, I'm afraid it will still be very difficult to develop it. Development required population. Without a few generations of continuous reproduction, the population couldn't grow. However, once the population grew, the output of elves wouldn't be able to keep up, which would restrict development. In order to get rid of the restrictions of the elves, it was necessary to vigorously develop magic farming, reviving the era of the ancient Moon Empire. At that time, humans had a bad attitude towards sprite worms, treating them as raw materials for making magic power dust instead of using them for farming. Farming relied entirely on magic. List's vigorous development of the arcane system was also based on the idea of arcanists being able to improve agricultural conditions. Even without elves, agriculture could still flourish. And this point might fall on the research of Druid magic. He had always restricted arcanists from researching Druid transformation magic, but he encouraged Druid planting magic. The magic plant seeds collected from the sky ship were all handed over to the arcanists for research. So far, a small part of the magic plants cultivated by the arcanists had already grown lush and verdant, but the problem of slow growth had yet to be solved. Chapter 1090. Under the name of the Royal Arcane Academy, there was a magic laboratory called Natural Source. This laboratory did not follow the Chief Arcanist system, but was similar to the Scientific Research Institute system. The Natural Source Laboratory focused on the development of magic plants and was divided into several research groups. Magic beans, magic wheat, magic melons, magic eggplants, magic peppers, magic ginseng, magic lotus, magic orange, magic pear, magic sunflower, transformation tree. Each magic plant had a corresponding research group that specialized in how to grow them. According to the different environmental requirements of different magic plants, the Natural Source Laboratory had branch laboratories in many cities of the Flame Island, and special plantations were planned. Even on the Black Horse Island of the Sapphire Duchy, there was a branch laboratory of the Natural Source Laboratory, where several kinds of magic plants were cultivated in the early stages. However, it had been 4 or 5 years since the cultivation of the magic plants began, and no fruit had been harvested. Magic plants were big trees cultivated by nature magic. Even a legume magic plant like the magic beans would grow into a big tree like a fruit tree. This process took 10 years to bear fruit. After another 10 years, the output of the magic bean tree would gradually increase until it entered the fruitful period after 40 years. In theory, during the fruitful period of magic beans, a single tree could produce 50,000 caddies of magic beans annually, and a magic bean tree could survive for hundreds of years. It was not known whether the Moon Empire relied on this kind of magic plants to provide food, but at least the Sun Empire of the Malfa continent must have eaten magic plants as food. The mages of the Malfa continent should have developed into druids, which was very different from the mages of the legendary continent. Unfortunately, theory was theory. The growth of the magic beans in the Fire Kingdom was slower than expected, and it seemed that they did not adapt to the environment here. The magic beans cultivated on the Black Horse Island for 4 or 5 years, not to mention growing into a big tree, were just small crooked saplings. The same was true for other magic plants. When a chief first studied the growth cycle of magic plants, Liszt was disheartened for a time. By the time he counted on magic plants to provide food, he was already 50 or 60 years old. However, when the Fire Kingdom was preparing for the founding of the nation, in order to create a foundation for eternity, coupled with the enthusiasm of the mages for nature magic, he began to vigorously support the research of magic plants again. It was under these conditions that the Natural Source Laboratory was integrated and independent from the Guild of Magic, and recently, it was affiliated to the Royal Arcane Academy. The cultivation of magical plants cannot be done without arcanists. The efficiency of ordinary arcanists is not high, so specialized druids are the most suitable. I wonder if I can find some bloodline of the Sun's Child after I open up the Malfa continent and develop them into a specialized farming race. The current clues seem to indicate that the Sun's Child of the Malfa continent seemed to have died. Although Phil, the old leathersmith, had been forced to reproduce by the Arcana Masters, allowing the territory to have many descendants of the Sun, it would still take a long time for these descendants to grow up and spread their branches. Leaning on the back of the gray-mouthed iron dragon Aon, Liszt looked at the dense forest and the surroundings and lamented, 10,000 years is too long, I can only seize every minute. He wasn't in a hurry to travel with Orn. According to the memory provided by Orn, it was originally born in the west of the Eagle Kingdom, probably at the border with the Blast Furnace Kingdom. Most of its childhood memories were vague and it did not know where it came from. However, before it reached adulthood, it met the first Duke of Grey Iron, who was only a Marquis Paik Mulan. Mulan was a type of flower. It was worth mentioning that after the fall of the Grey Iron Duchy, Duke Piero changed his surname to Grey Iron. His son, Pyford, brought the family back to the Eagle Kingdom and restored the surname Mulan. The first Duke of Grey Iron was far more charismatic than his descendants. He became a perfect Sky Knight at a young age, and then met the gray-mouthed Iron Dragon Aon, who was secretly hunting for food. It was like love at first sight between humans and love between humans and dragons. Orn and Paik fell in love at first sight, and not long after they completed the Battle of the Soul. There weren't many ups and downs in the story, and there weren't any heroic scenes like a hero saving a dragon, or a parting of life and death, or sacrificing one's life for righteousness. However, Paik and Orn lived a carefree life, traveling and fighting everywhere. It was only in their later years that they founded the Grey Iron Duchy. Not long after, Paik passed away, and Orn became the Grey King, who protected the Grey Iron Duchy. This is a dragon that attaches importance to companionship. A trip that he can leave whenever he wants to is better than any other method of breaking in. Feeling that the knot in Orn's heart was starting to loosen, he couldn't help but observe and conclude. He had never given up on creating the List Dragon Knight Training Manual. Different dragons had different training methods. If it was an ordinary Dragon Knight, he could only achieve perfection by finding the most perfect training method. He usually relied on external forces to force perfection. With the blessing of the power of fate, he was so willful. However, in order for his descendants to be able to successfully ride a dragon, he still had to summarize his experience. Roar. Orn let out a sound that sounded like a spoiled child. He wanted to drink potions. I don't have the red dragon water for now, only some ordinary potions. Just make do with it. List took out a handful of ordinary potions and threw them to Orn. Orn swallowed the potion and let out a happy roar. He didn't complain because it wasn't the red dragon water. For it, magic potions and whatnot were secondary. It was enough for it to be able to travel around with its own knights. It focused on spiritual perception, not material perception. So, they traveled all the way to the west. When they arrived at the former Grey Iron Duchy that had been abolished and merged back into the Eagle Kingdom, they entered the environment that Orn was familiar with. In his spiritual world, List's figure was already completely clear and he had become an existence of flesh and blood. In other words, the knot in his heart was removed and the soul imprint was successful. At this moment, List had officially become a Grey Iron Dragon Knight with a perfect stage. At the same time, he felt that one of the threads of fate that surrounded him suddenly flickered. He concentrated and plucked this thread of fate. Very quickly he successfully felt the source of the thread of fate. It involved a dragon that was waiting for him. This is the power of fate. If I go with the flow, I will be able to enjoy the results. He stopped paying attention to the power of fate and reconnected with Orn through the soul integration. Let's go, Orn. I feel a dragon in the distance, waiting to join the Fire Kingdom. Orn was a little unhappy. He didn't like List thinking about other dragons at this time. However, the soul imprint was successful. No matter how much he disliked it, he couldn't resist List's decision. He flapped his wings and flew into the sky. Under List's guidance, he flew towards the wild forest in the southwest direction. The land had already entered the mountains from the plains. The terrain was getting steeper and steeper. There were fast-flowing rivers and towering mountain peaks. It was like flying into 100,000 mountains. All kinds of World of Warcraft birds were hovering in mid-air. The dense forest revealed the light of mana retroaction. This was the paradise of World of Warcraft. There were no humans to disturb them. Do you see it, Orn? Roar. It's right there behind that snowy mountain. Go over and you'll be able to see it. I can already feel it more and more clearly. It's a beautiful sapphire dragon. Solid mana making power also solid. This feeling. Yes, it's the Royal Sapphire Dragon. Li Ji's masterpiece, the Tiger King, was a young man dressed in hemp clothes. Heavy snow pressed down on a black dragon. There were wine, knives, and stories in this pugilistic world. Chapter 1091. The Royal Sapphire Dragon was a type of sapphire dragon. The color of the gemstone produced by this sapphire dragon was called royal blue. The royal blue's color saturation was very high. It was bright and bright. Under the illumination of the sun, it would emit a shimmering halo. Upon careful observation, one could see that there was a hint of bright purple in the deep blue. The reason why it was named royal was that this sapphire dragon was the symbol of the Blue Dragon Empire. According to legend, the first emperor was a royal sapphire dragon knight. After he established the Blue Dragon Empire and proclaimed himself as the emperor, his mount was called the Royal Sapphire Dragon. Not only is the Royal Sapphire Dragon noble, but the gemstones it produces are also worthy of this noble name. List searched for the Royal Sapphire Dragon while recalling the information of this dragon. Royal Sapphire has the nature of sturdy magic. It can greatly strengthen magic and battle energy, increasing the user's combat power. Perhaps the increase for the Sky Knight is relatively small, but equipping the Earth Knight can definitely double the combat power of the Orders of Chivalry. If one had to compare, the Royal Sapphire Dragon was roughly equivalent to the Magic Metal Dragon of the Metal Dragons. Its combat power was definitely inferior, but its actual value was similar. The gray-mouthed Iron Dragon Aon did not sense the Royal Sapphire Dragon, but he was seriously dissatisfied that List was thinking about the Royal Sapphire Dragon at the moment. However, the soul imprint had been successful, so he did not care much about Aon's dissatisfaction. Let's hurry, Leo. There will be more and more such things in the future. You need to adapt in advance. I am the king of the Fire Kingdom, the future emperor of the Fire Empire. I will unify the legendary continent and the Malfa continent, and build a civilization across the entire planet. All the dragons will be reserved by me. Roar. Aun was speechless at such a thick-skinned thought. The mountains were getting higher and the snow was getting thicker. They were almost at the border between the Eagle Kingdom and the Yellowstone Kingdom. The geographical climate was somewhat similar to the Sichuan-Tibet line on Earth. However, there was still lush vegetation below the snow line. If I fly further, I will enter the plateau area and cross the border into the Yellowstone Kingdom. He activated the magic eyes and carefully observed the snow mountains and dense forests on the ground. Although the threads of fate are clearly linked to the Royal Sapphire Dragon, they cannot give me an accurate location. The threads of fate represented by the power of fate were not precise tracking devices, but rather a mysterious feeling. He needed to rely on Orn's senses of dragons to lock onto the specific location. We will circle around this snowy mountain. Pay attention and sense carefully. See if you can sense the location of the Royal Sapphire Dragon. Roar. Take your time. There's no need to rush. With our speed, we'll be able to sense it sooner or later. Roar. You're saying that if the Royal Sapphire Dragon hides in the cave, it will interfere with your sensing range. Let's look for it first. Anyway, we have time. It's normal to spend 10 days to half a month for the Royal Sapphire Dragon. For the sake of a new dragon, List naturally would not waver. Even if they had to spend a year and a half here, as long as they could obtain the Royal Sapphire Dragon, it would be worth it. This search lasted for 5 days. He could sense that the Royal Sapphire Dragon was nearby, but no matter how many times he went back and forth, Orn was unable to trigger the connection between dragons. We can basically lock onto it. With this place as the center, the Royal Sapphire Dragon will definitely exist within a radius of 800 kilometers. But I don't know why there's no feedback from the carpet search. The magic eye can't see the feedback light, and Orn can't sense it either. The search yielded no results, so List decisively started a second search. Again Orn. This time, the minimum sensing range of our carpet search is 50 kilometers. Even if the Royal Sapphire Dragon can hide its breath, it can't be shorter than 50 kilometers. The sensing range between dragons was usually about 100 or 200 kilometers, and the lowest was rarely less than 100 kilometers. At present, List only knew that the invisible dragon bard could rely on the material boundary to avoid and reduce the sensing range to 15 kilometers. No matter how noble the name of the Royal Sapphire Dragon was, it was just a sapphire dragon. It could not be compared to a sacred dragon. 2 weeks later, the carpet search of 50 kilometers was over, but the location of the Royal Sapphire Dragon was still not found. Standing on the top of a snow-capped mountain, Orn sprawled lazily on the snow, yawned, and then fell asleep. He was not enthusiastic about finding the Royal Sapphire Dragon. List jumped off the dragon tooth platform and stood in the knee-deep snow. He frowned as he looked at the surrounding snow-capped mountains and lush valleys. The threads of fate have always pointed to this place. Why can't I find the Royal Sapphire Dragon? According to the rules of the Smoke mission, I have already completed the prerequisite mission, complete Greymouth Iron Dragon's spiritual brand. Now it's basically a part of receiving the reward. It shouldn't have taken so long. Could it be that the Royal Sapphire Dragon can really block the dragon sensing? He thought. He took out a mirror-like thing from the space ring. It was the magic compass that Laird Truth had brought. This magic equipment could detect high-level magic in the surroundings. However, at this moment, after the magical compass was activated, only List and Orn's flickering light could be seen on it. It's useless. After 2 carpet searches, the magical compass has no effect at all. Its detection range is much weaker than the dragon's perception. Withdrawing the magic compass, he took out a broken crystal blade and blew away the surrounding snow with his aura. He was ready to set up camp and rest here. This strangely shaped sword was inlaid with densely packed crystals, which shone brightly under the sunlight. Against the backdrop of the strange sword, List's whole person looked heroic and vigorous. He was wearing a set of World of Warcraft leather armor made from the skin of a high-level World of Warcraft, golden cheetah. Its defense was not necessarily strong, but the glittering golden lines coupled with the magic metal embellishment made it look top-notch. The current List no longer pursued external forces. The defense of any equipment, even if it was made from dragon scales, was not as strong as the defense of his phoenix incarnation. The sharpness of any weapon, even if it was made from dragon teeth or dragon souls, was not as sharp as the Bone Dragon Winnie's Bone Dragon Sword or the Fire Dragon Leo's Rat Halos. The broken crystal blade and golden leather armor were just beautiful embellishments to show off his majesty as a king. Looking up at the bright sun above his head, List put aside the worry of not being able to find the royal sapphire dragon. He wanted to recite a poem to the white snowy mountains, the scenery of the north, thousands of miles of ice, 10,000 miles, before he could finish his sentence. A bright dark blue color suddenly rose from the top of a snowy mountain in the distance, flying into the sky against the sunlight. Even though it was far away, he could still see clearly that it was a blue dragon that was flying happily. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when the dragon flew, it would always leave a light blue trail that slowly dissipated. Quick, wake up, Orn. List casually kept the broken crystal blade and jumped onto Orn's dragon tooth platform. The royal sapphire dragon has appeared, let's chase after it. Roar. Orn flapped his wings and stomped on the ground with his hind legs, shooting straight into the sky like a gray arrow. The wind whistled in his ears. List had a smile on his face, his gaze firmly locked on the blue figure in the distance, and he continued to recite a poem. I can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, but by chance I find it without even looking. Chapter 1092. The gray-mouthed iron dragon Aon did not conceal its aura, so its aura was soon sensed by the royal sapphire dragon flying happily in front. Roar. The royal sapphire dragon's roar had no special tone, but the tone made it easy for List to understand that it was warning the gray-mouthed iron dragon not to approach him. Dragons were not hostile to each other. But there was absolutely no friendly atmosphere between dragons. This situation was more similar to the feeling between elves. Each dragon was an individual and there was rarely a group phenomenon. As the noblest creature in the world, the arrogant character of dragons did not allow them to live in groups. There were even some evil dragons in the wild who tried to hunt young dragons. The nutrition of young dragons was far better than any World of Warcraft or potions. Of course, there were few wars between adult dragons. Even the most powerful adult fire dragons among the elemental dragons, gem dragons, and metal dragons could easily defeat some weak adult dragons. But to completely kill an adult dragon, a huge price had to be paid, and it was very likely that the price was paid but it was not necessarily killed. It was a waste of magic power. Therefore, the royal sapphire dragon only issued a warning, then turned and flew into the distance. Aon, tell it to stop. We will use peaceful measures before resorting to force. List would not let the royal sapphire dragon go just like that. In any case, he was determined to have this beautiful gem dragon. Roar. Aon let out a roar. Roar. The royal sapphire dragon turned its head to warn again. The warning was useless. List drove the gray-mouthed iron dragon toward the royal sapphire dragon regardless, and soon the distance between the two was shortened. The royal sapphire dragon was not afraid of the gray-mouthed iron dragon, so it had no intention of escaping. When the gray-mouthed iron dragon approached, it quickly turned around and issued a final warning to the gray-mouthed iron dragon. Roar. Roar. The two dragons, separated by 800 meters, hovered in midair and confronted each other. Sunlight shone down on the gray-mouthed iron dragon, reflecting a faint glow. When it shone on the royal sapphire dragon, it flashed a magnificent bluish-purple halo, as if it was wearing a coat weaved by the glow. List had to admit that the royal sapphire dragon's appearance was at the peak of gem dragons. He was second only to the invisible dragon Bard. Its body length is approximately 55 meters, and its wingspan is approximately 65 meters. Its wingspan is longer than its body length, so it doesn't appear bloated. Instead, it appears somewhat slender and soft. Its blue dragon scales with a hint of purple in them are exquisite and translucent, and its body's curves and proportions are perfect. It's full of power and elegance. Carefully sizing up the royal sapphire dragon, List silently praised it. Until the royal sapphire dragon could no longer tolerate it and let out a provocative roar. Roar. He then gestured for the gray-mouthed iron dragon Aon to turn his body and expose himself to the royal sapphire dragon's field of vision. He said in a clear voice, "Royal sapphire dragon, I don't know if you understand the human language and if you can understand what I'm saying. If you can understand, please give me a response." The response was given. But this did not mean that the royal sapphire dragon understood the human language. Instead, it was conveying a message. If they did not leave, it would launch an attack. List smiled and said, "Don't be so rude, royal sapphire dragon. I came to meet you with sincerity. It is fate that has guided us to meet here. You are a dragon and I am a dragon knight. You and I are destined to have an inseparable dragon rider fate. Unfortunately, this line was fed to the dogs. The royal sapphire dragon did not seem to have any contact with humans and did not understand the human language at all. When it saw that List and Aoun had not left, it flew into a rage and flapped its wings fiercely. Then, gray wind blades flew out from between its wings and blasted towards List and the dragon. It actually knows magic? List was shocked. He had never seen a dragon release magic. For dragons, they did not need to rely on the power of magic. They themselves represented the pinnacle of power. Their bodies and dragon breath were the most common way of fighting. Aoun twisted his body and somersaulted to avoid the bombardment of the wind blades. List took the opportunity to take out the 5-meter-long Thunder Fury dragon spear. At the same time, he cast magic eyes to carefully observe the magic released by the royal sapphire dragon. In his special field of vision, the wind blades that were constantly bombarding him showed the unique luster of high magic. It's not magic. It's condensed from high magic. It still belongs to the category of dragon magic. He quickly determined that the royal sapphire dragon could not release magic. Magic was made up of magic that formed runes and then formed a powerful sequence of attacks. The magic condensed into wind blades in front of him was similar to the fire rain that the fire dragon Leo created when he appeared. There was no sequence of rune combinations. Fortunately, it's not magic. It belongs to the acceptable range. Just as he was concentrating on his analysis, the royal sapphire dragon saw that although the grey-mouthed iron dragon dodged its attack, it was still flying around it with its pair of dragon eyes. Its anger surged again. Its crystal-like wings flapped fiercely and lifted itself up. Then it twisted its wings and spewed dragon magic again. At this moment, the sky suddenly changed color, as if dark clouds were pressing down. Pieces of hail condensed in the air. Like a bullet exploding, it hit the grey-mouthed iron dragon. Every hail cut through the air with a sharp, ear-piercing sonic boom. Hailstones and sonic booms were everywhere. This is not magic. It's more terrifying than the high magic, super magic released by a Chi alone. It's almost at the level of the supreme magic, super magic released by her riding a unicorn. List was shocked. After the shock, he was quickly pleasantly surprised. The stronger the royal sapphire dragon was, the happier he was because it was his dragon. Aoun, let's break it. One man and one dragon rushed to the royal sapphire dragon against the crazy hail. The invisible and intangible dragon magic mixed with the dragon fighting energy wrapped around to form a protective film, resisting the magic hail attack that was more violent than magic. As a perfect stage grey-mouthed iron dragon knight, List's combat power at the moment was definitely at the top of the dragon knight. With the combination of strength and skills, the combat power that the dragon knight could show was not something that a single dragon could do. Boom. The hail hit the protective film woven by magic and fighting energy and quickly melted and vaporized. Only a small amount of it could penetrate the protective film and hit the dragon's scales. But the penetrated hail was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and it was no different from scratching an itch. One man and one dragon quickly penetrated the flashy magic hail attack. Seeing that it was about to collide with the royal sapphire dragon, this beautiful dark blue sapphire dragon did not panic in its beautiful dragon eyes. It just continued to flap its wings at a normal rhythm, then rolled up more hail to launch an attack. But the next moment, List suddenly realized that the hail that should have been melted and vaporized by the protective film seemed to have solidified dozens of times at once. Not only did it not melt, but it was like a real bullet constantly tearing at the protective film. Then with a strong impact, it hit the grey-mouthed iron dragon. It left a deep impact mark on the dragon's scales. Roar! Aoun felt the pain. List, who was connected by the mind and soul as one, also felt the pain. But his brain was exceptionally clear, and in a quarter of a breath of thought, he analyzed the reason for the sudden increase in attack. This is the special nature of the royal sapphire dragon's magic. The gemstones it produces can strengthen magic, and naturally, it can strengthen itself. The strengthened magic attack directly made the condensed hail harder than rock and even comparable to the hardness of steel. Hitting the grey-mouthed iron dragon was no different from a machine gun baptism. It hurts. It is indeed powerful, worthy of being known as the magic metal dragon of the gem dragons. Unfortunately, a dragon without a knight, no matter how gorgeous its attack moves are, they are just flashy without substance. He endured the pain caused by the constant bombardment of hail and shouted loudly, "Royal Sapphire Dragon, become my dragon, you and I will be one, and then you can burst out with your true talent and combat power." 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.